right, call the meeting to order at 6:35. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? 3.0, audience and communication. And this is an opportunity for any of you to address the board on action matters before the board at this meeting and/or matters not on the agenda. Non-agenda topics will be referred to staff, taken under advisement, identify next steps, if any, or scheduled for a future meeting. So the only thing really on our agenda is the consent agenda, which are our minutes. So if you just want to talk about the budget, which I assume that's why you're here, you can do that during the discussion time. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to talk about now? Okay.
Jill Lowry. So, just revise me so the last budget meeting that was here a couple weeks ago, that's just a proposal that you folks all authorized to go through, correct? And then this week is another budget on top of it, or do you just keep working towards it until the very end? Like, so
yeah, we just
this December 3rd one that you all said yes to?
Oh, we didn't say yes. We haven't voted on anything yet.
Okay, so this is just work, this is a proposal on top of today's, on top of the next few.
2 weeks ago was a budget work session, because we're not allowed to work on the budget outside of open meetings. So this is our opportunity to get information from our principals and from central office to help us start looking at the budget. And then we have everyone in the audience, help us do so as well. And we've added some budget buddies for today. So, so we all have the same information as everyone out there, but no decisions have been made about anything today.
Okay, so I had a question. So in the proposal pack, the administration wanted to put an assistant cross-country coach in for $4,037. I was wondering, and I looked in the handbook, how much we pay the actual cross-country coach. And I couldn't find that, or the athletic director. And I went through the whole Bible of Charlotte, like all the expenses, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So
Okay, so that's going to be part of
Okay.
our budget work session, so I'm just going to hold you off for 1 second,
Okay.
but I'll definitely write down that question.
And I just have one other quick question. So how can we never see any cost cut from the district office? We always see budget cuts from within our school. How can we never see anything from the district office?
Oh, I feel like we
Would you
do.
like the only representative from the district
Yes,
office?
would you mind, Bob?
The district office, you mean the supervisory union?
Yeah, your office.
The supervisory union board works the same process with that budget that you're working here. So if you were going to hear of any reductions or additions being considered, it would be part of that process, not part of this process. And this board only is interested in the beginning point for that board, which is the baseline budget for CSSU, and then the final budget, which occurs hopefully Wednesday night this week when that board finishes its deliberations. So
is
if
that
you were
public?
interested in that, you'd have to attend that meeting, not this meeting.
But, so that's never publicized in any, like in any of our literature or anything? Is that on the website that we could see
It's
that
on
as
the
well if we
agendas.
can't make it?
Yeah, it's on the agendas also, when those meetings are. And
I know, but where's the final numbers? Like if you can't make it to these meetings, it should be publicized somewhere.
It is.
Okay.
The CSSU board has the same sort of website that the Charlotte board has. And in fact, the information is, like one tab below or above Charlotte to get at all the same information you're seeing here tonight.
Okay,
So the baseline is there and everything else that goes into that process.
okay.
And those meetings are also televised. So
not the budget ones.
sorry, not the budget, I'm sorry, not the budget.
Unless they're a part of, but in the SU budget is getting bigger, in part because, special ed is at the SU. So there's some, it might be a little hard to compare from year to year. But you should be able, if there's a specific item in that SU budget that you're interested in, you should be able to look at them and compare.
Thank you.
All right, any other audience and communication? Mr. Noah.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Tom Nola, and I've been fairly outspoken through a large number of meetings And as a result of my just being frustrated with the lack of change, I'm here again tonight. And something that you just said, Kristen, brought to mind a comment that I frequently heard in reference to budgets. And passing the buck in regards to the special education costs to the state, I think is somewhat faulty in terms of every one of us here who face increases by the state and the federal government have to readjust our budgets accordingly. And that's not something that I personally feel the school boards have attempted to do. I have in the past talked about accumulative increases in everyone's costs, which it appears is ignored. Now, I thoroughly understand the increases in special education costs. However, there are certain cuts that can be made. For one thing, which I'm sure you all are aware, I am a retired Vermont educator, a special educator. I know how the system works thoroughly. I know where cuts can be made. And there are many opportunities where that could occur, one of which is caseloads can be increased. I don't know what your present special education staffing is now regarding a special education supervisor. However, in the district that I worked, there was one special education supervisor for the entire supervisory union. That is potentially another cut. And there are many other cuts that can be made. But the issue is there the desire to? Is the need to? Is there that much attention given to all of these increases that are sustained year after year after year, continue to raise our property taxes? In terms of what the state is presently proposing is a 7-cent increase across the board for everyone's property taxes, how is the board going to think about that in relationship to the costs that we have? From my perspective, Charlotte Elementary may be a better place for children to learn, but it's not becoming a better place for me to live when I'm retired on a fixed income. I have to monitor my expenses with these increases. It seems to me, and I thoroughly feel, that the school board doesn't make an honest attempt at cutting positions. Historically, when new teachers are hired, they're not hired at the bottom of the scale, they're hired at the top of the scale. I think all of us would agree that the higher the salary does not necessarily mean competence.
Okay, so,
Higher salaries are not indicative of competence.
Mr. Noah, we need to get to, and we're going to be discussing the budget during the discussion session, so we'd like to get to our board work. And just to clarify for the record, my comment about special ed being at the central office was state law requires that coordination be through the central office. So that is why the budget there may seem larger, because money is funneling through there and then coming back here as revenue or as expenses. And just another point of clarification, our special ed budget for the upcoming year is down 4 to 5%. So, but let's move along to the budget work session unless someone else has something that's unrelated to the budget that they want to talk about. Otherwise, the board needs to get to some work, and then we will take comments and questions from the audience.
I'm sorry, but this does concern us, and we are gonna talk about the budget.
We are, but we just have to
Yes,
follow
we are.
we have
We
to
are.
follow.
Do you know that in this magazine, it talks about the fact that we are paying 4 times for what we're paying per student since the mid-'80s. We're getting the exact same test scores. You guys keep throwing money, okay? We're getting the exact same test scores. We spend 4 times the amount. I would like to read an article. Am I
You
gonna
know-
be able to do that afterwards?
Well, I don't
We're gonna
think
talk about the fact that we're losing. This is,
Rhea, I'm
no,
not cutting you off, but we need to, we're
Kristen,
gonna work
you know
as a
what?
budget.
You
We're
are
gonna
gonna
work
hear
as a
us.
board.
You're gonna hear us tonight.
You can hear us.
You're gonna hear us tonight.
Rhea, we will
No,
hear you, but
Kristen,
first we're going to get
no,
information
Kristen.
that helps us do the
No,
budget.
Kristen,
Yes.
we're gonna talk about this. We're sick of what you're doing. We've had it.
Kristen, in all due respect
We
to you
need to get
and the
information
board,
as a board
Let-
that's
You
going
need
to
to get
help
the
us make our
information from
decisions.
us,
Right, and first
Kristen.
we need information from our
Yeah.
principals and central office.
Uh-huh.
We need to get that information so that we can then be thoughtful and have
We see how
deliberation
thought
and
you-
hear
you've
about
been.
the
We see you built
specifics.
a building for, how much was that, did you pay? And how many classes are in there? And how much is administrative? And you said the same thing, you said the roof's leaking. The boiler needs to be replaced. Do you know what you did with the money? You spent it on a building for you guys. Now you're asking for $6.8 million? Are you crazy?
We haven't asked for any money,
Are you
Rhea.
crazy?
We
You
haven't.
should have spent that first bunch of money better. Now you're asking us for $6.8 million?
No, we're not.
Hey, you know what? You should have spent the first money a whole lot better than you did. That's totally unacceptable. That's
Okay.
not okay.
So we are going to move on, 4.1 budget work session. 4.1.1 is decision packet, oh, I'm sorry, 4.1 point, I printed the old one. 4.1.1 is revenue?
Yeah, we're gonna
Okay.
Greg and I are gonna do revenue and tax estimates first, and then allow you to head back into decision packets.
Thank you.
Okay. We're gonna go through the two sides of this piece of paper. The first is revenue, the second is tax estimates based on information we know from the state. As I said, page one is a very early revenue estimate. I'll go down through the numbers that we have in there at this time and what may or may not change between now and your next meeting. Starts with investment earnings. We've estimated the earnings that Charlotte can anticipate for 2015. I'm running down through the 2015 proposed budget column. Is the same number that you actually earned this last year, 28,400, so we've carried that forward. We've carried forward building rental from the prior year. We use a transportation estimate from the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont generously supports a significant portion of your transportation, and it's based on last year's transportation expense. So we're pretty firm on that number from the state. We don't expect that to change. Special education revenue from the state is dependent on the service plan that was reviewed by this board in a prior budget work session. The state now has that service plan and is determining on their own what revenue we can expect. We've estimated what they're likely to answer in about a week when they give us that answer. So those numbers will change slightly, the 4 special ed numbers. IDEAB and IDEAB pre are federal programs. We have adjusted those downward through the course of the last 2 years for sequestration. If the Congress changes its direction, those numbers may go up. Medicaid is based on the administration's investment plan from Medicaid funds it has in hand. I think you'll hear later tonight that there's a recommendation from the administration that we take up what we're spending out of the Medicaid fund. So those numbers will likely change as we get close to the end of the budget process. All that adds to the subtotal revenue. We're anticipating Charlotte will see $851,780 in local revenue for the fiscal year 14-15. Are we clear on revenue before I flip over the page? Sensing. Okay, so if you turn over the page, this is a short form version of how to calculate education taxes in the state of Vermont. The education taxes are first based on an expenditure budget. I have used, for purposes of this exercise, the baseline budget you started your process with of $7,600,000 or a 3.35% increase. I have then subtracted the $851,000 in local revenue I reviewed moments ago with you to get a net spending number. The actual out-of-pocket expense to educate children in the community of Shelburne is anticipated to be $6,748,000. Everybody see that number?
The community of
Charlotte.
What did I say?
You're in Charlotte tonight.
Well, I called you Williston about a half an hour ago over there, so I'll figure it all out by the end of the month. Okay, so the net spending in Charlotte is anticipated to be $6,748,000. We divide by the number of equalized pupils that are educated in the school. That's down to 421, as you can see on the table, to get a net spending per pupil of $16,011. Taxes in the state of Vermont are based on spending per pupil, so that $16,000 number is key. In the state of Vermont, we then divide that by what's called a base amount. The state legislature sets both the base amount and the statewide education tax rates. At this point in time, your tax commissioner is required by law to publish a recommendation to the legislature. She both published that recommendation and a revision to that recommendation last Friday. Those numbers, per her last letter, are $9,382 for a base amount and $1.01 for a statewide tax rate. Both numbers have been taken up year to year. The statewide tax rate is key. She is recommending the legislature consider a 7.4% increase in the statewide education tax rate for all communities of the state of Vermont. We use the base amount. We divide the spending per pupil in Charlotte by the base amount and then multiply it to the times the statewide tax rate I just described to get to an effective equalized homestead tax rate for Charlotte of $1.72. You only use that tax rate on the percentage of pupils that are educated in the community school of Charlotte. So that's 66% of your kids attend school here. We take 66% of that tax rate, then divide that number by your CLA. We have used the same CLA as last year because we don't yet have the new CLA to get an effective tax rate for Charlotte for 14-15 of $1.116, which is a 10.16% increase over your homestead tax rate for the prior year. I'm willing to answer questions on everything I just said.
First, excuse me, just
Student
Rhea.
population has declined by
Can
25,000.
you be recognized, please?
Yep, my name is Rhea.
We're
No.
gonna see if there's questions from the board first, or from the budget buddies folks there. Does anyone have questions for Bob about the revenue or the tax rate implications? And I just wanna confirm that, so the baseline does not include any of the either reductions or additions that were proposed at the last
Correct. It
meeting.
is what
So it's
you got in-
just to open
yeah.
the doors the same
Yep.
next year with exactly the same thing that we have
Yep.
here today. Okay.
I have a question. Bob, do you have any predictions about the CLA?
I don't. You and the community would know better than I would. It's the best gauge is property sales in the last 2 years, how they sold relative to their assessed values. And if they've sold in excess of their assessed values, you're likely gonna not get a favorable CLA because it'll be adjusted to take that into account. Whereas if they sold below assessed values, you'll probably get some benefit in your CLA. But I don't know. I won't know until after you all know on January 1st or 2nd.
Oh, we'll know by then.
Yep.
Could it be a lot worse than 102.49%?
Just after having said I really don't know for the community of Charlotte, in general, property values aren't moving rapidly one direction or the other. So CLA changes have lessened significantly in the last few years over what they were doing 5 years ago.
Okay.
Okay.
And then if you can just say your name for the record.
My name is Rhea Dillway Morris. I'd like to talk about the Commissioner or Secretary of Education Committee. About something he had said, since 1997, there has been a student population decline of 25,000 in the state. The staff has increased more than 3,000. That's an unstable no matter how we cut it. Pooling resources among merged districts often offers the biggest bang for our buck. We don't need 272 school districts. Do we need 63 superintendents in Vermont? Can 24 or 22 be the number? I'm wondering why we're losing 25,000 students and we're increasing the administrators by 3,000. Just wondering.
Administrators by 3,000,
It's not administrators.
or is just staff in general?
Okay, well, staff.
And Rhea, I can't, I mean, I don't know if anyone up here can answer that. I mean, that's a statewide situation. Chittenden South
Staff.
is the biggest supervisory union. We are in the biggest supervisory union. We are considered not a large school. Arcade, even though we have declining enrollment, is considered a pretty large school. There's schools with 70 or 80 kids. And we're doing everything we can to consolidate and get more bang for our buck by pooling the way we purchase things as a supervisory union.
This is the Secretary of Education that's saying this is unsustainable.
Right, and you think about some.
We're losing 25,000 students. We're raising the amount of staff by 3,000, even though the numbers are going down.
Well, Rhea, if you look in the presentation, it shows how much staff we have
The
caught.
Commissioner of Education is saying it's unsustainable.
Right, and that's an article about the whole state of Vermont. If you look in the presentation, the handout, you can
Are we
see.
not in the state of Vermont right
We are,
now?
but since
Is
2006.
Charlotte in the state of Vermont?
Right,
Are we
but that's
losing are we losing students in Vermont?
But are we increasing our staff? We have been decreasing our staff since 2006, at least. I mean, if you want to look at, if you read the handout, you can see all the cut, or at least a sampling of the cuts that we've made since 2006. And, you know, we have parents out there complaining our class sizes are getting too big, but as we see the numbers come down, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we are cutting back. I mean, we're cutting teachers 0.1 here, 0.3 there, because we want to make sure that we're, you know, have as lean a staff as we can and still deliver a quality education to our kids. An article about the whole state of Vermont isn't a fair comparison. It's saying you're doing exactly like the state. We're doing our best to do what's best for our kids and best for the taxpayers.
True.
Well, maybe you could read this before you keep reading from the article, because it'll show the specifics for
Kristen,
our school.
You know what? It's unsustainable.
It is, in the state of
Too many
Vermont, I mean,
superintendents.
you can have that opinion. Okay.
Things need to be consolidated. You are taxing us to death. We cannot afford it. I make the same money I've been making for 5 years. You guys want increases every year. I make the same amount of money. Where am I supposed to take it from? I paid $12,000 in property taxes. $10,500 of it goes out of my town. $1,500 of it stays here. The rest goes out to other communities to pay for their schools. I'm making the same amount of money. You guys look for raises every year. What am I supposed to do? Where am I gonna get it from? I'm just wondering, where am I supposed to get it from?
Yeah, we understand that.
I don't think you do. I don't think you're hearing what we're saying.
Well, Rhea, you know,
Kristen.
in our defense, this is the first budget meeting you've come to. We
So
really
I don't have a valid
No,
point?
you do, but we really do
No,
think
Kristen, I
about
don't
the
think you're
tax
hearing what I'm
implications.
saying.
And to
I'm
say
saying
that we are
I'm
looking
making
for
the same amount of
increases.
money.
May I finish?
You keep raising your expenditure.
Well, you know
You
what,
can't get
Patterson
blood from
Fuel
a stone.
charges us an increase. We have to pass along these costs to the taxpayers.
Well, I
And
introduced
to make it seem like we're not doing a good job trying to cut corners.
I don't think you're doing a good
Okay,
job. That's
well,
what I'm trying to
okay.
tell you.
So,
ask you a question?
we've worked on revenue and tax implications. Do people have other questions about revenue or tax implications? If you can just say your name, Jill, too,
Jill,
for the
Jill
record.
Lowry. So, if I'm looking at this correctly, it's saying in 2014, 2015, the proposed increase is 10.16% in Charlotte. Is that what I see?
If
Yes,
we
that's
open
the
the doors,
estimate at this
exactly.
point.
Because speaking to people at CVU District, they're proposing a 10% increase in their school budget. So, you know.
Well, I think these aren't proposing it. This is saying for both schools, if you open the doors exactly today or exactly in September as we did this year, if you have the same programs, if you have the same level of staffing, if you have the same amount of fuel that's gonna heat your building, that's what it would cost. And then if that were the case, it would be a 10% increase. It's not saying we're proposing that, we have not voted on anything. But to open the doors in September, exactly as we have now, that's what it would be.
And so, can you tell me, Bob, what the average cost in the United States is to school a child, spending per pupil? It's at Charlotte, $16,011. Can you tell me what the national average is?
No.
The national or the state?
Well, national and state. I think it's around $12,000. But you don't know. Can we find that out?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Can we find that number out? I think that would be.
We can, I mean, I don't know how valid
I mean, when
a
you're spending
nationwide-
$16,000 per pupil, that's a lot of money. you
Right,
know.
but if you're in an urban area and you're not busing your kids, you have so it's kind of apples to oranges. We could look at, we certainly can readily find out what the average is across the state and similar.
Well, if
I
you're
can-
gonna pass a budget, we just should say to people, if this is the increase, and this is what we spend, and this is what we get. So, I'm looking at it maybe as a positive thing, saying, Charlotte has these great programs, whereas, maybe they don't. So I'm just looking at it as, well, if we spend $4,000 more, I need to help sell it to my neighbor or to a senior citizen or somebody who is on a fixed income, that's all, so.
Can I answer
Oh,
Jill
of course
specifically?
not.
Or what I can do for you is I can give you the statewide average spending for 13-14, because
Okay.
that's known. I don't have it with me right at the moment, but I have it back at my office and I can get it for you so you can compare the average across the state last year to the 15,089.
Okay.
I have no number yet for an average for 14-15 because no one has reported their numbers other than me to you this evening, this estimate for Charlotte.
Okay, that's fair.
And then lastly, I cannot get a USA-wide number because these numbers are tabulated based on criteria that Vermont uses.
Okay.
No other state quite uses this system to both develop costs and tax its residents. So the only relevant number I can get you in all that is a comparative one for last year, and I'll get you that.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank
And
you.
one second, Tom, and I'm thinking that, although it doesn't help people, if you have $100 and your tax bill's $200, this doesn't help you that much. But I thought that when we were re-looking after the budget failed last year and representing, I thought the data showed that our taxes oddly were the 30th lowest in the state of Vermont out of the 280 however towns. Does that ring a bell?
No.
No.
I'd have to look again at that data.
think
We
I'll
have that
do that
information
too.
for last year since everybody has tax rates for the current year, and I can pull that out if you'd like as well, Kristen.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Nola, and can you just say your name?
Tom,
again?
Nola, Bob, I have a question for you. How will the proposed Vermont state property tax increase affect the proposed budget, school budget?
This board tonight heard what the implications are relative to the direction Mary has given recommendation for the legislature. It is likely their knowledge that that number comes out 10.16 will influence decisions they're going to make, not at this meeting, but at subsequent meetings to finalize their budget.
Will those decisions be towards reducing this proposed budget, or leaving it the same, or possibly increasing it?
The best answer would be all of the above. The board is working on this presentation and prior ones that have both additions and deletions in them, increases and cost savings. So I'm going to guess that they're going to look at both and decide what is best for the community based on everything they have.
I could then assume that you can understand the exasperation that some of us have in that the questions that we ask are not given a definitive answer, and it's frustrating to think of it that way.
Hopefully the answers I've given you have been definitive. I don't know of, at any point in the conversation, I've not told you.
Now, I'm not questioning the information that you gave, I'm questioning that there is not at this time a definite answer in relationship to the proposed state increases. That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, Tom, we're just getting this information, I mean, we're getting this information right now. The
She
board
pub-
hasn't
Yeah.
made any decision about anything yet. You know, he can't know what we're gonna do with the budget, because we haven't even talked about it yet.
I understand, but that's why I want to be sure that everyone clearly understands my concerns, and I'm voicing them now, so that no member of the board could tell me, well, Tom, you didn't say so. I am, and I want to make that clear.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for coming and speaking.
In the interest of clarity?
Yes.
Just so we know how much I don't know, the numbers you see here are based on a recommendation that Mary published at the end of November and then republished last Friday. That is not the final answer. The final authority on tax rates across the state is the state legislature, and up until they leave session in April, May, or June, we really don't know the final answer. So I just want you to know how the ground with which this is built on, okay?
But we're lucky, because our state rep is here in attendance, so he's hearing, you know, our concerns and the challenges that we have, just the fact that our baseline leaves us with such a high increase. And, you know, we keep thinking this next year is gonna be an easier one, but every year it's a really challenging budget situation.
Well, mine's a real simple one, and my hand was actually up first. Are you gonna continue to have the meetings here at CCS instead of CVU? Because that's kind of an inconvenience.
Well, the budget meetings are all here. Our regular school board meetings
Okay.
are at CVU.
And why would they be at CVU though?
We have three of us are on the supervisory union board. That board meets at 5 o'clock. And then we have a common topic typically at 6. That's information that's very valuable to all of us and other people in the community who are interested in our schools. And then each school has their own local meeting following at 7. So.
At CVU?
Yeah.
Yes, so we.
All the towns go to
All the other
CVU.
towns do it that way. We decided as a board to try it this way.
You did?
Yes,
Do you have a big turnout?
we don't have a big turnout regardless.
Okay, but
But our budget meetings are all here because we are much more likely to have community members who do not have children in the school attend our budget meetings. Mr. Antachka.
Kristen says, we, meaning the board, decided to have our local meetings at CVU, that we did not include me. Nothing that goes on over there at the group meeting requires that we have our town meeting in Heinsberg.
that's interesting.
Mr. Antachka.
Yes, just to say a couple of words about how the statewide rate is calculated. And it's really, it's not that the state legislature sets the rate. It's based on the total amount for the school budgets throughout the state. And it's based on the number of equalized pupils throughout the state. So when each of the school boards from every school district in the state provides the numbers for the budget numbers that have been passed at town meeting, that number is rolled up, and based on the number of pupils, that is then calculated to be the, I'm sorry, it's not based on a number of pupils. It's based on the grand list, the total grand list throughout the state. So if the grand list is increasing, the tax rate can be lower. If the grand list is decreasing, for the same amount of money, the tax rate is going to be higher. So it's a function not only of the budgets that have been passed throughout the state, but also what the value of the grand list throughout the state is. So, just a point of clarification.
I don't understand that. Could you explain that a little bit better? It sounds like
Yeah.
you said if there's less people, we spend more.
Yeah.
If more people, we spend less. I don't understand.
Yeah, I started out by saying the number of pupils, and I didn't really, that's not really the way it works. It's the grand list is the value, the total value of all the property in the state,
Okay.
okay? And if all the school budgets throughout the state, and all school districts throughout the state, provide their school budgets, to the state, it comes out with a total number, right? The total cost of education throughout the state. And then that is divided by the grant, that's divided by, or the grand list is divided by that number, and it comes out to the statewide property tax rate. So if the grand list is going up, that means there's a lot more value and the tax rate could be lower. If the grand list is decreasing, property values are decreasing, then the tax rate is gonna go up, because you gotta provide the same amount of money based on a lower property value. Okay, so that's the kind of factors that go into the statewide property tax rate.
Okay, thank you. 4.1.3 decision packets. And if anyone needs one, there's some of the handouts at the sign-in clipboards.
So, Audrey and I have made some minor adjustments to this document since the last time we met. We'll point those out in a minute. We do want to say that, having heard about the news we were going to get this evening, it did, definitely cast a different light on these proposals. And we did consider, we looked at them all again and had the conversation about starting to peel things off. And what we came to is a decision to look at the prioritization again. There's one switch in priority that we've made that we'll highlight in a minute, but that we feel that all of these deserve the board's attention and discussion. And but we understand that this is, feeling a little differently tonight than it did 2 weeks ago. On the page that's entitled Proposals for Budget Reductions, there are no changes on this page. Just those 5 rows indicating areas of potential reductions totaling in $223,000.
And is there any way to give even a rough estimate for the expressive arts world language?
Well,
hard to say.
it is difficult
Yeah.
to say.
I mean,
Until we do-
$2,000?
Well, basically, if you look up to the second line, and to know that a tenth of a position for art is that amount, as the number of classes are decreased, let's say potentially in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we would have to then go to those schedules and say, okay, now there will be, let's say, PE. There will be 6 fewer PE classes in a given week because there's 3 less classes needing 2 PEs a week. So 6 fewer classes in a PE teacher's schedule. What does that mean? That could mean a reduction of a half a day. We have to do all that work. But roughly, depending on the person involved, depending on their salary, those 0.1s or 0.2s would add up to different amounts of money. But this is a reference point to which you could use as a guide.
Because it's going to be, 3 less sections of Spanish or French upstairs. I don't even know if we're adopting the production. It just seems like that could be a really significant number based on what we're looking at.
It really would depend on what the board decides with.
Okay, so if we give you the direction today that we want to take the recommendations of the configuration committee and reduce staffing in 6 through 8, would we be able to get an estimate of that amount for next meeting?
I could try to, we could
Okay.
try to work on that, definitely, if that's what the board
Okay, thank you.
wants us to do, we will do that.
Yes.
I'm
Or
sorry.
even if we didn't get as far as that, just to say, if we make this decision, then this number results. If we make this other decision, then this other number results. Seems like we could,
Right.
if we define that carefully enough, we can get the number.
So we didn't do a percentage value on that 223,000. I believe it's a little over 3%. So on the next page is the first page of decision packets. And we haven't made any changes here except for switching two items in their priority. The third line down was previously the fourth line down. The fourth line down was previously the third line down. So as we were discussing, regardless of what the board decides to do with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we know we're going to have bigger class sizes in 5th grade, requiring us to need more computers to meet the needs of those larger classes. Therefore, we've put that need in front of the replacement of the second middle level laptop cart, which was 1 year ahead of schedule due to the condition of that cart. So we've just traded those two. Everything else is in the same order. The total at the bottom of the page is the same. On the second page, the item on the top, the 60% reading language arts specialist number was incorrect the last time we presented to you. That number was, I believe, $72,000. $51,000 is the correct amount. That's been adjusted, and the total on the bottom has also been adjusted to reflect that change. The total on the bottom of this page is the total for both pages combined. Just a word about this 60% reading specialist position that we didn't share last time. And forgive me, there's a little bit of a tangled story here, and I'll do my best to make it as clear as possible. Let us know if you have questions when we're done. Right now, we have 40% of a phys ed position that's paid for through Medicaid funds. And that came about years ago in connection to a wellness plan. When the CSSU had a wellness committee and there was designs to add more PE time, there needed to be more PE time here at Charlotte Central School to either increase the number of minutes students had PE, and I couldn't exactly tell you what year. So this plan was to use Medicaid funds, which was an appropriate use of Medicaid funds because it was linked to this wellness plan, to pay for 40% of a physical education position. That has continued to be paid for that way. However, the rationale is non-existent anymore because we've maintained that level of PE for all our kids for years and continue to and plan to continue to maintain that level of PE, 40 minutes twice a week.
50 minutes at the middle level.
50 minutes at the middle level, thank you. So our proposal is to take that, it's actually about $26,000 of a phys ed schedule salary that's paid for by Medicaid, and move it out of Medicaid and put it into the general budget. Just that's where it belongs. That's $26,000 that's not in the general budget right now, under instructional. Our proposal is to use Medicaid funds, which will balance in approximately about $80,000 next year, to fund this position of $51,000, this reading specialist position. So I guess for the board's consideration, that means that position will actually feel like about a net cost of about $26,000, the amount that we're moving over from from Medicaid into the general fund to pay for that phys ed, that 40% of the phys ed teacher. The Medicaid money's there. It's already built in, and that balance continues to grow based on the the revenue projections and what's been collected over the last years.
So the .5 PE position that is no longer being funded by Medicaid, that's already into the figures we've been, the staffing figures we've been dealing with? Okay, good.
It's actually 40%, 0.4.
Okay.
Is there anything else in our budget that we can use that Medicaid money for? I mean, are there other things that we could also take advantage of?
We could take a look. The requirement for Medicaid reinvestment is that it not be used in a supplanting manner. You cannot use it to support expenses that were already part of the operating budget of the school. And it should be targeted towards activities that get close to the same subset of students who were part of the revenue that was generated off of Medicaid. But the key is that you can't supplant it. So you really can't pay out of Medicaid for a position that used to be paid out of the general fund. And to Greg's point, when you stop and look back over 5 years and you're still paying for the same position out of Medicaid, it might be time to move on. So, hope that explains it.
Thank you. All right. Oh,
Yeah,
go-
so questions about, and everything else on that page is the same as it was last time we met.
Okay. And again, we'll start with the board and the people up here, and then we will move to the audience.
I have a quick question. I'm Heather Weeks, budget buddy, just to make sure I'm understanding what I'm looking at. So, does this 2015 proposed budget reflect what you're putting forward here now, or will it be altered based on what we decide tonight?
Second answer's better.
Okay, got it.
But what you just held up is our revenue, which is not this.
Right.
Okay.
But so what I think I need to understand is looking at what you proposed reducing and then the decision packets, which would be the increase, so the net difference is about $4,000 or so. So where would I see the total budget?
We don't have one, so we're gonna
Okay.
have to figure out what do we wanna reduce? Do we wanna reduce additional things beyond what's recommended? What do we wanna add, if anything? Are there other things not even on the list that we wanted to add? And then they'll sort of revise the numbers and
Okay.
we'll look at them again at the next.
So, can I ask another Medicaid question? So I think you said, Greg, you said something about $80,000. On the revenue side, I'm seeing a projection of $29,000.
Right.
How do I understand that?
The 29 is what was there last year, what has been the standard. We won't change anything on the revenue page or your baseline budget until you all have made a decision on what you want to change it to. So once the decision is made to do what Greg recommended with Medicaid, then the Medicaid revenue that will be applied will go up accordingly.
So there's more Medicaid revenue outstanding that we could,
Yes,
lack of a better word,
the
draw
little
down
mini
that
course
we
on
have not.
Medicaid, the school earns Medicaid credits in the form of money from the federal government for providing services that in prior years were
did not.
part of someone other than schools' obligations to deliver. It's the federal government's way to encourage schools to continue to do this. Those monies get deposited in a Medicaid account, and then they develop a reinvestment plan to spend those monies, and it's account separate from the general fund of the school. Consider it a little checking account, if you will, off to the side that receives all the Medicaid earnings. And the only thing we ask them to do is make sure they're spending it on stuff that's valid under the Medicaid umbrella and make sure that they're spending money they have.
so, and the money that we have, or that's left to draw down, is the 26, or whatever the plug, so to speak,
No, the
is on what-
26 recorded on that revenue sheet was
Yep,
what, up
last
till that
year.
point, we were anticipating drawing out of that account.
Yep.
They have far more dollars than 26 in the account right at the moment.
Okay.
I don't know that off the top of my head. You might.
I do.
You do.
Okay.
Yep. It'll be after we get the revenue we're expected to get this year
Yeah.
and spend what we're expected to spend. We'll have about $85,000,
Okay.
between $80,000 and $85,000.
Good question.
Anyone else up here? Fine. Eric? All right. Mr. Nola?
Thank you. Tom Nola. Greg, I have a question for you. I need some clarification. On the page that says decision packets, first item under the proposal, it says add 2.0 FTE non-intensive classroom paras. Am I to understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that those para-educators are going to cost $63,322?
That's a fifth grade question. Audrey's going to take that one.
Am I understanding clearly that that's the cost for 2 para-educators?
Yes, it's a high estimate. It's based on a projection that the Human Resource Department gave us, based on if paras were hired and they took benefits as well as taking a family plan. So that's what we were given from HR, and that's what we use based on their
Okay.
projection.
Then I have another question for you then. If they are para-educators, what is their endorsement? Do they have a special ed endorsement? Do they have a graduate degree? Do they have a bachelor's degree? And those questions are predicated on the fact that para-educators, from my experience, are usually not certified educational instructors. So once again, I really need some clarification as to why the cost is $63,000.
And all I can tell you is the estimate we got when we were putting our decision packets together for 2, and their general ed paras that are going to be in the regular ed classrooms, was that amount. And again, it was based on benefit, them taking a benefit package as well as family benefits.
You know,
For clarity,
I can,
for
let me
clarity,
finish.
that's 2 positions, so
I
each
understand.
position is $31,000.
I understand
And-
that, Bob, but please let me finish before you clarify what I already understand. I clearly understand that's the total amount, no one has told me otherwise, and you divide that by 2, I understand it's more than 30,000 per. I clearly understand the math, but I think my question is not being answered. I'd like to know, and you don't know, and I would think that you would need to find out, why is the salary so high for a para-educator? I'm not insulting their ability nor their expertise, but that salary divided by 2 is equivalent to a first-year teacher who's got a degree. This is what I don't understand.
Mr. Nola,
And
it's
when
not. It's not, because a first-year teacher might be earning, I don't know what they earn for it, but that doesn't include their benefits. This includes their benefits.
Okay, then my question to you, Kristen, is going to be exactly this. Then why can't that be broken down so I know specifically what is the salary of that para-educator per year? And then I'd like to see what that salary is compared to the benefit package. Now, if without you giving me definitive numbers, I don't know what that salary is. So my point is, once again, why is the salary so high? Let's just assume that the salary, the benefit package is $15,000. That still doesn't tell me what their salary is. We're looking at about $36,000 per, well, no, not that, I'm sorry. Let's say $30,000. So of the $30,000, what is their salary? What's the cost of the benefit package? That's my question.
May I take a shot at answering your
Sure.
question? In general, for employees in this category, benefits are about 20% of the full cost of hire. So 20% of the $30,000 is a likely sum to consider for purposes of this conversation as benefits cost. The actual benefits cost and the actual salary depend heavily on the rate at which the employee was hired and the benefit elections that they take, that they avail themselves as and they can vary quite significantly if they pick up various different health plans. But in general, think 20%.
I understand, and I don't mean to be beating a dead horse here, but once again, herein is a situation where thought needs to be given to these kinds of costs. Now, I understand costs, and rising costs. But what I don't think anyone has hit upon is the ideology of carefully looking at what you may deem to be small, minuscule percentage increases in terms of how they spiral into continuous increasing costs. Now, when you look at the residents in this town and you say you're doing your best, and salaries like this are looked at, and paraeducators are not paid an exorbitant amount of money, just the thought of it being $30,000 or more for a paraeducator, that's a big expense, a huge expense. And that's what I've been trying to point out. This is not a matter of my criticizing your decisions, but your economic decisions. The consequences of these costs, they're overwhelming. I know that increases rise at all levels. But yet, as I previously said, any one of us here has to look at our own budget needs based upon the increases that we face. The school board, I believe, has to do the same thing. You've got to look at the whole picture. And comparing this school system to any other system is of no consequence to me. I live here. I don't live in Shelburne. I don't live in the southern part of the state. I don't live up north. I live here. This is my concern. So making comparisons to percentage increases in another town is of no significance to me, because I'm looking at the realities of what I have to continually pay. I'm not beating down teachers by any means. I've already said that. I'm a retired Vermont educator. But yet there has to be some consideration given to the people in this town who support the school. I mean, the teachers in this district, honestly, in this school particularly, they cannot in any way complain about a salary. And even if they never got a salary increase for the next 2 or 3 contracts, they would be so far above the average salary in the state of Vermont for educators, carpenters, truck drivers, plumbers. Let's really think about this. You know, you might have to make some difficult decisions. I understand that. But someone's got to have the spinal fortitude to finally listen to what I've been saying. I know there aren't many people here, but that doesn't mean they're not concerned. I feel like I'm a lonely voice in the wind. No one seems to listen. That doesn't mean because this place isn't packed and people are standing that you can just possibly assume the attitude, oh, everybody's okay with the increases. You have a moral obligation to the residents of this town. I'm going to stop there because I've said enough. Thank you.
We haven't voted on any increase.
I understand that,
so-
Kristen, but you need to understand what I've previously said. I have been saying this over and over for years, and that's the same dialogue that I get from the board. And we turn around and bingo, there's another increase. So that to me is really not significant. It isn't. To take a stand on this issue and what I'm saying takes some spinal fortitude. And quite frankly, I don't think this board has got it. They don't know how to say no.
Anyone, Bria?
Okay. So I'm kind of gonna piggyback on what Bob was saying, Tom was saying. How many paraeducators do we have in this school? Do you guys know?
I don't know, just for background, I mean, first off, we haven't chosen whether or not we're going to fund this. But the reason we have an increased class size for 5th grade, we only have 2 teachers in 5th grade, and that's why that recommendation is, it's an additional expense that we haven't seen before because we typically have had 3 teachers per grade.
But do you guys know how many paraeducators are in this school?
No, a lot of them are linked to special education plans.
We could
Yeah,
get
we can
that
get you
number.
there.
Not off the top of our heads. It's between 20 and 30.
Yeah.
20 or 30
Yes.
paraeducators?
Yes.
Can you tell us how much that equates to for 20 or 30 paraeducators
Do you mean in
Dollar
total?
amount?
in total?
Again, not off the top of our heads, but we could find
Could
that
you
number.
get us that
But
information?
many of those paraeducators are linked to student support plans that are mandated to be provided for.
I still would like to see that.
Just as a point of information relative to para salaries, I don't know if it makes you think about it any differently, but a typical non-intensive paraeducator, which this position would be, earns between $11 and $12 an hour.
And Rhea, the reason for the request for the pairs is we're going into 5th grade with 54 students, which would be around 27 students in a classroom. And as a result of that, meeting with the teachers, rather than having another teacher, we just, the teachers and special educators decided, and with my support, that they would like to stay with 2 instructional groups, but have paraeducator support rather than having another teacher. So
they
we
have-
talked about that, because that's a large number of kids for 5th
You said
grade.
25 kids?
27 kids. We're anticipating, if we open the doors tomorrow, we would have 54 kids come, or they're currently in 4th grade, that we're gonna open the doors next year with 54 kids going into 5th grade.
Jill?
My son in 5th grade only had 2 teachers, and they had over 26 kids, and 5th grade was his best year, I have to tell you, with the 2 teachers. So I know it can be done, and he still talks about that year over and over. So I just want to let you know that, they did a great job, and I know it's always great to have extra help, but, and they're great teachers, so just to let you know it can be done. Second of all, I have a really big angst about the cross-country coach. $4,000 to maintain student supervision and safety. I know that was recommended to you by the district office.
No, it wasn't. It was a group of parents, and as a disclaimer, including myself.
I thought Audrey said last meeting it was,
She's talking about the salary. Again, that was the
Salary.
Oh,
salary.
the salary.
Yeah.
I
The
thought
salary
you meant
piece
the
again
position. Okay.
was
Yeah.
something, what I
Right.
requested what the salary would be for a new assistant coach coming in, and that was
Right.
what I received as a total in the
Right.
HR
And-
department.
and I appreciate you guys putting this together, but once again, that's why we have volunteers. I know the coaches at CVU for football don't even make $1,200, basically. And so to pay an assistant, that's why I asked about what they pay the actual coach. $4,000 is really out of control. So, but otherwise, thank you for putting this together, because I know it's not easy.
Okay, so how does the board want to proceed? Are we prepared to give some direction? And our budget buddy, sorry. Has anything else occurred? Any other questions come up for anybody? Do we want to, try to run through the reductions and additions and give them some guidance about, we're not gonna vote tonight, but give them some idea of what we're thinking so they can, make some changes and we can see how that all sort of sorts out? Are people prepared to do that, or?
First question is whether there are going to be any other different numbers the next time we meet, as there were this time, or are we confident in what we have in front of us here?
What's our confidence level on the number?
I think quite high, subject to the revisions I'm gonna make on the revenue page that I outlined for you, things that firm up between now and January 7th when you meet next. And I don't think we're anticipating significant changes on the material that you two have presented between now and next week, so pretty confident.
As long as the board understands that these are estimates based on certain assumptions.
So do we want to give them an idea about, let's start with the reductions page. So reduction 1, full-time primary classroom teacher, and rationale due to decreased enrollment in grades 1 through 2.
Is that number pretty accurate, the 77?
Again, that's an estimate.
Yes.
So, are we good? I mean, if people could let me know if they're thinking this is a reduction they want or they don't want. Do people want this reduction?
Oh, we're gonna go line by line.
Yeah.
So how many students to teacher then, if you reduce that?
So
You
if you
page
look,
an earlier slide.
if you look
Oh, it's
at
on there, I got it.
Yeah.
You don't have to
That's fine.
slow down for me then.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
We can explain.
So
I see
in
it.
first and second grade, we expect projected class sizes to be 19 in first grade and 18 and a half, or 18 in one class,
Yeah.
19 in the other in second grade.
So I know that in kindergarten this year, they have there's a para-educator. Would there be a para-educator then also going kind of from the 15.5 up to the 19?
No,
or-
in the first grade, currently
Yeah.
the plan is not to add a paraeducator with 19 first graders. I do have my eye on that number. If it goes up, you know, that is a possibility to come to the board with that request, but not at 19. This has been stated at previous meetings, but also the paraeducators that are in the kindergarten classrooms this year were added after the budget was passed
Right,
this
yeah,
past year.
I remember.
And are not included in the baseline.
Okay.
So those two positions do not carry forward.
Okay. And obviously, the decrease from the 3 to 2 teachers is really just a number of you had a large number of second graders who will move on to third grade.
Right.
Correct.
Are there other questions or comments about the reduction 1 FTE primary classroom teacher? Does that make sense to everybody? Clyde?
Excuse me, I think at least that you're going to continue to recommend the 2 paraeducators?
Not at this time.
No,
No. Do you mean first grade, kindergarten?
no, further up the line for the 5th grade.
Oh, that's
it's here.
Yes, I am, based on the enrollment of 27 to start off with, yes.
Can you repeat your question, sir? What was your question?
If they were going to continue to recommend that additional 2 paraeducators in the 5th grade.
So, are we good with, the reduction? Okay. And the corresponding reduction in expressive arts staff, which is a .1 FTE art, for another $9,680.
So that's just because you have one less class to teach, or whatever the number of classes is to teach, so they don't have to go as many times.
Yes.
Does that imply that a full-time art is 96,000?
No, I mean, no.
No, laughs the art teacher.
That's a good question, though.
So they're just other,
Salary and benefits, it must be.
I'd have to take a look at Cindy's numbers to answer that well.
Okay. Well, if we can
We'll dig
make
into
sure
that.
that that's the right number. And the .1 will give us the same number of art per week for the remaining classes, although it reduces our teachers' ability to prep in between classes. But the .1 doesn't cause an actual reduction to the students in the
Correct.
That's correct.
days and times.
This does not impact the number of minutes students get art
Okay.
in a week.
Are there any other questions or comments about that reduction?
It seems to contradict what we heard last time. So explain to me again how that works.
What do you mean it seems contradictory to what you heard last time?
Reducing the art teacher's time further will not impact the number of minutes of instruction. How is that going to work out?
Because every class currently has art once a week for 50 minutes. So and there'll be one less 50-minute class in the course of a week. Now you might be thinking, well, one 50-minute class doesn't seem to me to add up to a half a day, which is what a .1 reduction is. But as many of you have been through, sometimes not every reduction, every one class that wouldn't add up to a reduction in a staff in an expressive arts. However, when there are over, we did an analysis of the art teacher's schedule, the number of periods they taught, the number of minutes available in her schedule, and 90% of her position allows enough time to meet all those classes' needs, 50 minutes per week. So everyone will have art 50 minutes a week as they do now. There's one less class moving through the system.
I'm skeptical of that calculus, so I really am not in favor of that particular reduction. I have another question. In 6th grade, where you say pending decision on a configuration proposal, explain to me again what's pending there.
Can you, what page are you on?
Yeah,
Bud?
what page?
Hold on. Current enrollment and staffing with projections.
Oh,
So, Clyde, what I've put together is if we stayed with 3 instructional groupings, the class size would be 17.3. If we went to 2 instructional groupings, we would have 26 students per class. So the change in staffing, it's pending the recommendation of the board if you want to approve the decision packet, which reduces the middle level staff by 2.0 equivalent FTEs. So it's pending what you guys decide.
and these slides that have the for the 6th grade one, it shows the 2 instructional groupings, which was the recommendation on the top. For 7, 8, it was flip-flop. So the
Yeah, we just-
the recommendation from the configuration committee is on the bottom, which is 23.5 students in 2 instructional groups per grade.
Are there any contractual stipulations regarding the number of students in a class?
According to SQS, for grades 4 through 8, the average class size is an average of, the average class size would be 24 and a half students.
And what is the average number of students here per class at that level? Is it 24?
If you look at that particular, it shows you the current class size and what we're projecting if we go from 3 instructional groupings to 2. So I just went over that. So for 6th grade, if we stay with 3 instructional groupings, the projected class size would be 17.3. If we move to 2 instructional groupings, it would be 26 per class in 6th grade.
I don't mean to be asking the same question, but for my needs, I would really appreciate your using the mics. There are times at which
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can't hear what you're saying.
These don't amplify.
They're for the television. They don't amplify to you.
Oh,
But we will try to speak up.
okay, thank you.
So one last question on the reduction in the art. Seems like there are other classes that are only held once a week. What was the decision around art versus music or something else that would be just a once per week class?
So, as we move as we've gone through the years and made different reductions, and it impacts different numbers of classes that move through the way that falls in different years, you hit those breakpoints. So in other words, there's also 2 fewer music, because let's say first and second graders have music twice a week.
Okay.
So there are 2 fewer music classes needed for next year. However, you might remember that there was a music reduction last year, making this year's music schedule pretty snug.
Yeah.
We're meeting the contractual requirements, but it's pretty snug. When we did the analysis of the music schedule for next year with this class out, a reduction is not appropriate. So those cut marks fall on different staff, depending on where they're, the sequence of the years and the
I
cuts.
got it.
Are there any other questions about the 0.1 FTE reduction for art? Yes.
Yes, so,
Will you just state your name just for
yes, Alice
TV?
Traeger. And I am the teacher we were talking about. I'm the art teacher for the whole school. So I guess I'd like the board to just consider, should this be the year to do this cut? I understand why the principals are proposing it, but it still means if there's maybe 7 less kids next year, I still teach the whole school. So, and I do it in 2 rooms, upstairs, downstairs rooms, and it still means that I have to order about the same amount of supplies, prep a similar number of materials, if you think per kid. And I'll still be looking at the same amount of art sculptures, handling them. I'll still be doing just about the same amount of grades. I still have the same amount for displays, so I'll still have, I'll still be trying to integrate with the teachers. It just will all be doing it in a half day less. So, I understand that there will be, if you go with the cut in the most primary grades, there will be 50 minutes more. If you go with the cuts to the middle school, there might be 2 more classes. So I see why it's proposed, but just so you know, it's, still the same number of kids. And the classes are gonna increase, which is really, kids, for me, they come once a week. I'm on for that period of 50 minutes, and if there's 27, 26 kids, that's a huge difference than there's 17. It's very hard for me to talk to every kid about what they're doing in that class with that number. So that's just, I thought I better speak my point of view, because that is it. That I still teach, I still handle all the details of 430 kids, and if it's 423 kids next year. So that is the story. I understand why it's being proposed, but just try to keep a great quality program. It'll be hard.
Thank you. Rhea and then Joe.
So my name's Rhea Dillingworth. What I'm wondering is, how much does she make right now for a school year to teach art?
I don't know, it's in the town.
To the town report.
Yeah, it's in
We
the
don't have
town.
those numbers in front of us.
Around $80,000?
Pardon me?
Around $80,000?
I don't have the number.
So would what you receive be less than $80,000, or you're just gonna get?
Yes, it would be cut by 10%, and then.
Do you make 80,000, is that correct?
Something like
Rhea,
that.
if we can just direct the questions here and then,
Yeah.
Well, you didn't have the answer, so I'm asking her. Is that not okay?
right, we just
You
try to
didn't- but
have
you
it
didn't-
not get beat.
Yeah.
We've
I'm
had
not-
things in the
I'm
past
just-
where,
You didn't have the information.
Right.
She's sitting right there, so I asked her.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
it's-
I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to do that. My bad.
Joe?
I I understand there was talk from the last budget or last year's that to make kindergarten to be full-time. Is there a reason why that we're doing, like, this coming year? I mean, I thought that we're gonna table that one to not to make it a kindergarten like full-time. So is there particular like reasons that we're gonna bring it into like full-time starting the school year?
Well, it was a recommendation of the kindergarten committee last year. It didn't get funded by the budget. The reasons why the kindergarten committee, I'm speaking for the kindergarten committee, Greg, but the reasons they thought it was a valid thing to do then remain, so they've proposed it again. We haven't talked about whether or not we think that's a possibility.
I'm just a question is that I know that there are strong feelings among the communities and also like the boards on having a full-time like kindergarten. I also feel that there should be one. But if it comes to making a decision of adding something that we don't have in the beginning or taking something that we already have, I would think that probably keep whatever we have and don't fund whatever we don't have. So instead of taking something from the art, from other positions, which we're already providing. So it's sort of like, why are we funding something that we don't have in the first place? But I do understand that there's good reason why that we want to fund that. But then I think that when it comes to make like decision, well, something I already have, why should I cut that one and something I don't have it to beginning with and fund that one instead? So that was my, when I saw this packet and it just come to mind to say, I understand why on both sides, but I would like to think that we want to keep what we have rather than to start something that we don't already have to begin with. Because
Yeah, I think that's how things shook out the
Yeah.
last budget cycle too.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's not easy like decision for you and for like everybody else, but it's just my opinion to say that maybe keep something what was working, what we have, and maybe next year, maybe another time to fund something that we don't already have, because what happens we need to do another cut, like for the following budget, are we going to take away the full-time kindergarten, or are we going to take away like art or take away music? Because I understand we are like like I said, we're pretty like snug in a lot of the program. So I think
Well, maybe Greg wants to speak as the kindergarten committee chairperson, although I will say, my daughter's 15, and I started coming to board meetings when she was 4, hoping we'd get all-day kindergarten. So we keep saying next year, but it's been 11 years.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, I know there'll be additional time to talk about this, but, this is a prioritized list, and this is at the top of the list. For a reason, I feel even more compelled this year to recommend full-day kindergarten for Charlotte than I did last year, as I see the impact of Common Core state standards on the kindergarten first and second and third grade instructional delivery, and what we're asking of our kindergarten first, second, and third grade teachers to give the more rigorous content and demands of the Common Core. And I'm watching kindergarten teachers make day-by-day decisions, making them feel quite uncomfortable about what not to cover today, what not to teach, what part of the Bridges program do we skimp on, and we have a tremendous palette of resources at this school to provide support for 5 and 6 year olds in a kindergarten program. And for 4 months, we're really limiting kindergarten students' access to that palette. And I really think that for $32,500 to move to a full day program, that this is something I feel strongly about.
Okay, so do we have more questions or comments about that one line item, the reduction in EA staff .1? Rhea?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why, okay, so you're talking about the core curriculum and the standards not being, apparently, we're not reaching those standards. What I'm wondering is, why are we spending 4 times the amount and getting the same test grades? I'm still confused. Can you explain that to me? Any of you guys? Do you think there's something fundamental, like there might be, instead of throwing money at the problem, do you think there's something fundamentally wrong with our system? I'm just wondering.
I don't think there's something fundamentally wrong with our system.
But we're getting the exact same test grades. I'm wondering if there's a basic breakdown in our school system. I'm wondering if you feel that way too.
Again, I didn't closely read the article that talks about education throughout the state of Vermont. I will read it when I get home today, but, we rely on information we get about our school and our supervisory union, and we proceed from there. We certainly are concerned with how all the kids in Vermont are doing, and are mindful of the increasing costs when we're making our decisions. So back to the $9,600, is this something that we want to ask them to consider when making the next set of numbers for us? I think, Clyde, you said you are not?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, one question I have about this is that the one that says to be determined, if we make the cut of 2 additional teachers in the middle level, then would that would bring the art down more?
Potentially, yes. And I would, that's what I will look at before the next meeting on January 7th.
Right. So the 0.1 right now reflects, well, never mind, I know the answer. Okay. I don't know yet how I feel about
Okay.
it. I mean, it
So-
depends on the big picture.
Yeah, that's our question mark. All right. Reduction of 2.0 FTE middle level teacher content teachers for reduction of 126,298. Do the board or budget buddies have questions or comments about that one?
Well, I have a serious question. There is an answer to the point you made about test scores and the unchanged conditions. I'm not going to give it to you now because it's long, it's convoluted, and it intertwines too many of the topics under discussion here, but I'll be glad to give it to you in a different venue. But to get back to the point, yes, absolutely, make that reduction.
Okay. Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, my comment would be, for the middle level teachers, I have no problem with the class sizes that would imply. I think from a numbers standpoint, it's a sensible cut. And I would just qualify that by saying that I'm entirely uncomfortable with the process for how those reductions in force take place. And I understand that our principals don't have control over that, but I want to be on the record as saying that none of us is going to be particularly pleased with the outcome in terms of the actual personnel outcomes. But they're not going to be the optimal outcome for education. So I guess long way of saying I'm going to hold my nose and vote for that based on budget constraints and classroom norms in terms of size per, pupils per instructor. But I think I'm not going to be happy with the outcome in terms of the actual personnel.
Heather or Megan?
Dora? I mean, it seems like, it's just not specific to this, but if we're expecting 14 kids less next year to have 3 FTEs dropped, seems like a big number, but, I guess I would ask Audrey as the principal for the middle schoolers what her thoughts are with that FTE and the number of students going up that much.
We did a configuration study last year and looked at enrollment and projections, and the work of that committee, the proposal was to look at the reduction at this school year, and I support that proposal. Just knowing what our current class size is, how we compare it to the state quality standards, SQS, as well as within our supervisory union.
Okay.
And we've been doing it in 5th grade for 3 years now successfully.
And it's a 5-year plan, correct?
It's a 5-year plan,
It was
yes.
set to go in effect for this upcoming, but yeah, this is a big year of reductions.
Yeah, okay.
Adora?
I have very mixed feelings about this, some of them along the lines of what Eric said. I mean, the budget situation is very difficult this year, again. So given that it's an administrative recommendation to do this, I would support it, but I do have real concerns about it.
I echo.
I wish we could wait a year. That's my wish.
I echo all those concerns too, but I think we need to go ahead with that reduction. All right. Anyone out there about the?
I have a question.
Sure.
Catherine Knox. The content teachers, what content is that? What do they teach? Go ahead.
I can answer that question. At 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there's language arts teachers. That's a content area. Social studies, science, and mathematics.
So this, the 2 people are going to be affecting all of those subject areas?
It's an equivalent of a 2.0 FTE, so it could be pieces of a language arts teacher, pieces of or portions of a math teacher, science. We have to look at scheduling and the needs of the students and licensure, seniority of teachers, and look at those combinations. So it's an equivalent of 2.0 FTEs.
So that it will be the same amount of staff members, but they will just be teaching less classes, less students? Is
Right.
that right?
Right now, the students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade travel in 3 instructional groupings to receive their content area. I'm recommending going from 3 instructional groupings to 2. So that will increase the class size.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But we don't know if it will be the same number of teachers.
Correct. Mhm.
It could be that there's less teachers next year. We won't know that until a budget is approved and they do the schedule based on what the budget is.
And then, does this tie into those 2 para-educators that would be also hired for that 5th grade?
That's separate. 5th grade is expected to have 54 students coming in, which we currently have 2 instructional groupings. That would have 27 per class, and not predicting what would come in over the summer. So based on that, meeting with the teachers and the special educators, we decided that we'd like to stay with 2 instructional groups, but have para support in anticipation of that to help out with a higher class size.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I believe for the next one, corresponding reductions, there's not much we can do. If you could do whatever you can to get us
An estimate of what the reductions would be.
That would be
Yep.
helpful.
Mhm.
Next line item, O&M savings due to personnel changes and staffing levels. And
This
Greg
is-
spoke to this last
Yeah,
time.
this
but-
really isn't, this doesn't need a yes or no from the board. This is just an expected favorable situation that we hope will pan out as a result of entering into the year with slightly less staffing than is in the baseline. Due to retirement that we're not backfilling completely. So no one's being, no reductions in force are taking place.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving over to the first page of the decision packets. Anyone want to ask a question or make a comment about adding 2.0 paras for the 5th grade?
Excuse me, I have a question. Oh, is this?
Yeah,
my
if you
turn,
could
or
just
is
wait
it-
1 second. Hold that thought.
Thanks.
Maybe we could just, if, you can just speak to maybe Jill's question, because I think that kind of came before we were on this line item, but just to kind of get a little more elaboration on sort of where they've been in terms of class size, where they're going, what the needs are.
So the class size has been about 25. I believe the year Jill was speaking of, we did have one class with 26. Based on the needs of the class that's coming up, with needs Tier 3 supports, we just really feel we need to have some extra Tier 2 supports also that, and it's based on the 2 classroom teachers. If we know we're gonna come in with 27 and not knowing what's gonna come in over the summer, they believe they need that extra support with them.
So it's not just the number, but it's the mix of.
The mix of the kids, and that's why I said that the teachers met as well as with special educators, and just knowing the needs of those students. And the potential of having other students come in over the summer. As you know, in the past, in previous summers, if we were going to have a size over 25 or 26 or 27, I'd said I would come to you looking for that support. And so that's anticipating that knowing we're going to start off the year with 27 to begin with.
And I know it's getting down to small numbers, but when the central office gives you an estimate, Bob spoke to a roughly 20%-ish benefits to salary ratio. Do they give you a conservative sort of high number so we don't get surprised? Or
That's my understanding, Eric. We know it was high when we were presenting to you, but I believe that's the case unless, Bob, it's more conservative.
It depends on what you want to avoid. We try and use numbers for them all that will serve them well when they're out hiring, and are targeted to be in the kind of the experience base of hires in the prior couple of years. We do tend to be a little conservative. It makes more sense to us to have a hire and then have money left over than be struggling with, the talent you want to hire for a position, be it a para or a teacher, and not able to afford it. So, but those are recommendations from the SU, and if the board wants to accept some risk, we could go with a lower number.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know ultimately what the benefit elections are going to look like until you've.
You don't know until you have the person on the other side of the table you've chosen, and they're making benefit elections, given the array of choices they have.
And was there any consideration of less than full-time for these 2 positions? Or it was felt that we need full-time to support that group?
We discussed that too, and the feeling was they should travel because of the number of kids. And 2 years of experience.
Yep.
Does this impact, to the extent that these are kids migrating from another class, does that lessen the need in the 4th grade? Is it incoming?
Well, they're in 3
Cohort
separate
4.
classes now. So moving up to 5th grade, they're going to be in 2 instructional groupings. So as I mentioned before, we met to decide, do we want to keep them in 3 instructional groupings?
I just meant from like the para standpoint. It sounds like this group maybe has more paras per student than other age cohorts in the school. Am I misunderstanding?
We don't really have general ed paras that travel with the kids generally. So I'm recommending this because of the higher class size.
So right now they're divided
They're
into
divided
3
into-
groups.
right. And there's no general ed para support for them.
Oh, there's none now. Okay.
No.
I thought maybe
Because-
they had support now and
No.
you knew they'd need it next year.
No.
And then,
Yeah.
gotcha.
It's in lieu of having a teacher to take the instructional group.
Heather or Megan or Adora?
I'm in support of this one.
I am too. I think it's a tough one given the budget climate, I think it's a tough one, but I think I agree with your recommendation.
For the record, I would not add this personnel.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I'm going to be in the extreme minority on this one, but.
Well, I don't
class
know,
size
and
of
Mark is not
27.
here, so I don't know.
Well.
And I think we can run the numbers and see, we'll have
I think my
opportunity to
final point
revisit.
is, I perhaps should qualify that by saying at the moment, but, if you have an influx of kids over the summer, that might be a different situation, but the class size for 27, certainly a challenge, but not unmanageable. And it's not, looking at the numbers that are coming up, it's not a never-ending scenario.
Right, but to Audrey's point, she said this particular cohort, the professionals here felt would need that additional support to be successful in 5th grade. It wasn't just the sheer number of 27 instead of 25 or 26 kids. It was the needs particular to this 4th grade.
And presumably it's not just those kids that have the needs, but it's the other majority of kids being able to have an educational experience, that they deserve to.
Yeah, support the whole class.
Yes.
There are a lot of qualifiers in that don't get answered about who's doing what and what their behaviors are, which can be distinguishable from an academic need. We don't have those answers, so I'll rest with what I've said about, well, it may be a challenge, it's not unmanageable.
Okay. Anyone?
Yes, I have a question about that. So, I'm just trying to get some clarity around it. When you were just talking about the 3, were you referring to 3 particular students from the 4th grade that are moving into the 5th grade and needing?
No, I'm talking about that the current 4th graders are in 3 separate classrooms.
Right.
When they come up to 5th grade, they're going to be in 2 instructional groupings, where they're currently in 3 instructional groupings.
And so, is there something that, I'm assuming that some of these kids that are moving into the 5th grade are special education students that are requiring the need to have some additional, if it's not going to be a teacher, it's going to be a para support. So can any of that money come from a special ed budget? If it's going to be, if any of these kids are considered special ed, can that come from any kind of special ed budget?
I don't believe that we can take that money to support those students. I mean, the students who may have para support are going to receive their services through special ed that are coming up to 5th grade. But we're not able to take that money. The service plan already addresses that, the needs of those students.
Non-special ed expenditures
Yeah.
will not be special ed eligible for revenue. So it really doesn't make any difference whether you record them over here or over there. They're gonna be costs and you aren't getting any revenue for them because they're not part of an IEP plan for special ed kids.
Okay. But they could be working with special ed kids. They could be working with some of the behavior issues and such that come up through.
For special educators, we're required to do time studies that help pin down exactly how much time they have dedicated to services under special ed and what efforts they put forth for general ed, and then we have to separate that out for purposes of revenue. So,
I'll just speak to as a 4th grade principal, the students who receive special education or special education eligible have IEPs that dictate their level of support. That level of support in some cases indicates paraeducator support, in other cases it doesn't. Those IEPs move with them to 5th grade. That's separate and apart from this recommendation.
So this is kids who there might be kids who don't trigger the need for an IEP, but given the class size, need extra
We'll need the additional support.
in the class.
And so when I go back to this number here on the amount, I'm going to refer back to what Greg said about the paras now getting paid approximately $11 to $12 per hour. When I do the math on that, that comes to about, when you were looking at a 40-hour week for a paraeducator, which they probably would not be working, it comes to about a $20,000 salary at $12 an hour. And that, of course, doesn't include the benefits. So this number seems very inflated. And I just ask that we be cautious about that. Just because it's written down here does not mean that that's what somebody is offered, or that 2 people are offered.
Oh,
Right.
Right.
And so when you put the 63,000 down, is that your highest estimate that you would possibly be paying somebody? I know you can't say based on when they come in the door and what their experience is and what they actually are negotiating for themselves. But that number does seem very high to me. for 2 paraeducators.
It is, and I wonder, Bob, just given the tenor of everything we've heard, I mean, he said it's the most conservative, you know, assuming we get someone who'd be, you know, on the higher end of the para scale, you know, and maybe getting a family plan. Is there a way to get sort of a secondary, slightly less conservative number?
We'll take a look at the basis with which that number was created. We'll be able to answer questions that you've raised. I can't off the top of my head. And then you'll be able to make the decision on what you appropriately want to use to budget for those 2 positions as Audrey has proposed. How's that?
That'd be great.
And then my next question related to that, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Is how do you determine the paraeducators that come in? What kind of, and maybe this isn't the right time to ask this question, I'm not sure. What determines them to be the right person for the position? If they don't need to be a certified teacher, basically anybody could come off the street and say they want to work in a school and become a paraeducator. I mean, what determines, what are their skills? What's the skill set of a person? What's their job description for a paraeducator?
It's to support the delivery of instruction that the teacher gives.
No, I mean, what kind of credentials does the person that walk in the door have to have?
Some of them have college degrees, others may have a high school degree, diploma. We look for previous experience working with students. That's pretty much kind of what we look for.
Just a question, how do 504 students play into the grouping that you were talking about? And in reference to what you just said regarding the hiring of special educators, once again, brings me back to what I earlier said about salaries in reference to, and if some of them are from what you just said, just high school graduates, I really strongly would question the proposed salaries that are listed there. And I doubt that a high school graduate would be qualified to deal with students who have special needs. My other question is in reference to when we talk about grouping for students, are other special educators such as SLPs and guidance counselors with special educators utilized in a way in which any one of them can provide instruction for a child with an IEP? Because frequently an IEP student sees all 3 professionals. So is there an attempt, or has there been any thought to possibly utilizing those specialists in a more advantageous way to group, to potentially reduce costs for paraeducators?
We did not look at having an SLP or our school counselor to meet the needs of those students because they have their roles and responsibilities, and the SLP is meeting the needs of the students based on their IEP, not something that we'd have them go in and doing some work with the students instructionally within the classroom. We did not look at that.
The other piece, just to add to that, is those people have full caseloads, and those people that you mentioned, Tom, are part of the team of people who support some of those students. So a school counselor, even though they're on the regular education side of the budget, and they're not licensed in special education, they're part of a team that supports a student who has an IEP. So they provide consultation, they might even provide direct support. They're part of that team. So, but the fact of the matter is, those people have
their own roles and
Full
responsibilities.
caseload.
When you say full caseload, what are you specifically talking about in terms of a caseload number? 10, 15, 20, 16, 2, 4? What? What's a caseload?
We don't have that in front of us.
I understand, but consequently, once again, just to repeat what I've been saying, I think this is information that you really need to have at hand in reference to budget discussions. And I have had some questions tonight that have not yet been answered.
The caseload information was reviewed with the board and the audience at the prior meeting, at which time the special ed service plan was discussed and reviewed. We can easily get you a copy of that piece of paper, but the three of us don't have that up here right at the moment with us. But it is part of what the board has heard and understood relative to special ed.
Kristen, one quick
Okay,
thing.
oh,
Quick thing.
yeah,
Like in any kind of budgeting, I mean, I know we feel really strongly about this, so why don't you as a board say, here's $50,000, and we'll give you $50,000 for the two paras, and that's what you have to work with. So you're not saying no, and you're not saying here's 63,000, here's just what we can afford, and here's 50 grand. So that's just a thought, you
Yeah,
know?
that's an option, and thank you.
There is some special education information in the packet. It doesn't specifically speak to caseload, but it does talk about how many paras, for instance, are in the budget.
All right, full-day kindergarten. Clyde, how do you feel about full-day kindergarten?
Well, I'm still opposed to it, and there are good reasons beyond the money. You know, if you read the research on full-day kindergarten, there's absolutely none that provides any meaningful long-term data about long-term increased performance. If you take kids in the demographics that we have here and teach them things in kindergarten, they of course are going to reflect that in second and third grade. But beyond that, it doesn't show up. But more importantly, there's also research emerging that shows that all things being equal, like a child's ability, the learning trajectory for kids who do not have full-day kindergarten after the short-term effect wears off is steeper than that for the children who had full-day kindergarten. And the theory that's emerging is that to stick them in this regimented environment, which is what we're talking about, at that point in their lives, really interferes with the development of more important things. So what research there is, if you read this stuff, what research there is that shows some benefit is pretty much restricted to, how am I trying to say this? Demographics, ethnic groups, minorities that are pretty severely disadvantaged. And quite frankly, not to Sherlock, and if you further read the conclusions of the people that do the research, they will say, I'm not talking about our kindergarten committee, that's not research, I'm talking about genuine research. If you read the research, they say, and any of these possible achievements are so contaminated by the other unidentified factors that can go into a child's learning curve that you got to be really careful about drawing any conclusion about it. So not only should we not be spending the money at this point, there's not good evidence to prove that it's something we should do academically, educationally.
Before I ask Eric, can I just add an informational question? The Common Core, was the Common Core designed assuming that kindergarten was delivered full day? Do you know?
I'm not sure if the Common Core made any assumptions about the length
Of a
of
kindergarten
school day
day.
at kindergarten.
Okay.
What they did was they worked backwards from what they wanted kids to come away with as graduates in high school and worked backwards and said, this is what they need to be doing by the end of their kindergarten year. What we're finding is that our students are requiring, a bigger percentage of our students are requiring pretty intensive tier 2 support in spring of kindergarten, first grade and second grade, to bring them up to where they are commensurate with their peers. And I know that if we had more hours in the kindergarten day all year, we'd be able to access that palette of support that we have for more of them in a more flexible way.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to say, I'm not going to pretend to have a strong opinion on the academic merits of it. I mean, I've heard both sides, and it was debated pretty, extensively last year. So I know there are strong feelings on both sides. I would just say that, given that there's not an overwhelming support for it, and given the budget circumstances that we're in, I think strategically that's maybe not where we want to put the emphasis in terms of what we're asking for.
Okay. Now the kindergarten moms.
You go
Not
for
to
it.
put you on the spot, but.
Well, I thought I wanted it, but Clyde has me wondering if I should go do some independent research and figure out if there's really a negative effect later on in their learning if they're getting too much structure. So I don't want to voice an opinion yet. Which means I guess I won't voice it ever.
Yeah, I'm a kindergarten mom, and I was shocked when we moved to Charlotte and found out there's no full day kindergarten here, at least for the first 4 months of the year. And talking with, I've lived up and down the East Coast, and this is the only place I've ever been where it's been this type of mix, which has been interesting to say the least. I am a big proponent of full day kindergarten, and I see, as Greg was saying, that given that there are so many great things at this school, but at the same time I can fully see how some of the kindergarten teachers are struggling with fitting in what they need to in order to get them up to speed or to meet their goals, because there just isn't enough time in the day, September through December.
Thank you.
So I have agreed with Clyde on this in the past, especially given the resources and a lot of families in Charlotte where the families have a parent at home who can provide enriching activities for the second half of the day and a more gradual entrance for the kids into an institutional environment. However, I'm swinging the other way now because one thing I should tell you, Heather, is that in the past, as we've raised these questions about, should kids enter into a fully structured academic environment as, as fall kindergartners, and there is debate about that. There's legitimate debate about that, but one of the things the kindergarten teacher said at that time was, if you give us a half day, what has to happen is it pressurizes the academic environment within that half day. So any play-based activities or more relaxed pace, is compromised by making that choice. And as I've seen the Common Core become to be implemented and rolled out, I just think that pressure is now too intense. So I support the full-day kindergarten as a result of that.
And I oddly feel conflicted, although I've been a proponent of all-day kindergarten for 11 years. I'd like to see this included in the next things that we consider for in January. I mean, I think the merits are valid, and so if you could keep it in for now, since Mark isn't here, if we can keep that in the budget for now going forward and sort of play it by ear. We know Joe
when the original kindergarten committee made their presentation for what full day would look like. It was not then, and it will not be now, play-based activity. It was essentially the institution standing on these kids' chest, force-feeding them information so they can meet some arbitrary set of standards for what they're supposed to be like in first grade. It remains a philosophically and financially bad idea.
Is that your experience of kindergarten, just out of curiosity? Okay.
Jill?
Just a mom being here 24 years and coming to school board meetings. We came to Charlotte because we had a half-a-day kindergarten after the half the year. And I can tell you right now, being a mom and having a high schooler, our grades, when you look at the high school honor roll, Charlotte always has the most kids on the honor roll than all the other schools. And all the other schools had full-day kindergarten. And I know times change, and kids, you know, have ups and downs. But I tell you, just it's only 4 months, and just allow your kids to be able to get into the school, and the due process of being here already for 9 years. By the time they're here in 8th grade, they are so ready to get out of here. So to make them come, you know, just for that institutional part, and I totally get it, Greg, but you know, after 9 years, they are so ready to be out of here. So I'm totally against it. I think our kids do fine without just that 4 months of putting them here extra.
Well, given I have a kindergartner, that's great to hear because she was in the program this year, and you know, so I still believe in it full time. But
yeah,
and I don't think that she's in kindergarten here.
Go ahead, Rand.
Okay. Just say my name, I just want to say that, you know, you talk about the kindergarten program. I have to tell you, both my boys went to the after-school program at Shelburne Nursery School, and it was fabulous. And it was so much different than the kindergarten classes here. They were leaps and bounds ahead of the kids here in kindergarten. And what's interesting is their kindergarten teachers resented it. I mean, Liam it was so interesting. It was a privately run organization. They did all kinds of fabulous themed things that you can't do because your hands are tied here. They learned on such a different scale and learned so much better. They got to explore so many different things than is now current in the curriculum. And I think it's because of the standardized tests that you guys have to comply with. I think something's really broken down, and I don't think having a full day kindergarten is going to help that. I think there's a real basic breakdown in our education system. Spending more time here is not going to help you learn better because there's a breakdown. There really is a fundamental breakdown in our system. We're 32nd or 33 in the world in education. There's something wrong. And that happened, and we used to be number one, what was it, right after World War II? We were on top of the world. We're 32nd or 33rd, and we're one of the richest countries in the world. Do you think there might be something more basic going on here? I'm just wondering. But to get back to, they got to do a private after school program that wasn't bound to these standardized tests, and it was amazing how much ahead of the game they were when they came here. And so that's just my.
Can you just tell me, where did your kids go?
Shelburne Nursery School in Shelburne.
I've been sitting here smiling because I taught kindergarten, and it was the most memorable time that I spent as an educator. Memorable. I'm thinking about all the students that I worked with. And the more and more I thought about them, the more I realized that why I'm against full-time kindergarten is what's already been said. These children, so to speak, are like a piece of clay, and they don't know what they can be shaped into. Cognitively, they're not yet completely developed. They're unaware of stress and anxiety. And overwhelming them with a lot of academic material and what we think are technological necessities, we really tend to undo their emotional health, which is what basically makes them successful students. How they think about themselves, how they react to academic material against playing with sand, molding clay, running around outside, playing with blocks and inadvertently, in so doing, counting them. That's how kindergartners learn. Writing it starts with just a bunch of scribbling. So that I really disagree from my experience working as a kindergarten teacher. A full-day kindergarten, I think, is not advantageous to a child's complete growth. It's like a house. If a house has a poor foundation, the rest of it crumbles. And I think we need to really think about a child's emotional development first before we start overwhelming them with academic expectations.
I just want to make a comment that I feel like there are certain assumptions being made about the programming component of a full day that haven't been stated or asserted. And, you know, there are 2 kindergarten parents here that can talk to a little bit about what the kindergarten program feels like now, which is 4 months of half day. We haven't yet experienced the full day. And so all the things you mentioned, Tom, are part of our kindergarten program. Kids play with blocks, kids play with the sand table, kids play with the rice table, kids go outside every day, kids have explore time. Allowing us 4 additional months of a full day to work with the flexibility of our day, to have the time on academics as well as the time exploring and guided discovery, is just more opportunities for kids to access the different types of learning here at Charlotte Central School that we can give them. I haven't seen or heard of any research that indicates that a full day kindergarten could be detrimental to a student. So Clyde, if you have, I'd love to see anything you have that
I'll never find it again, but if you take the time to look for it, it's
okay.
I dug it all out last year.
So just you know, I don't want any assumptions to be made by the fact that if we have full day kindergarten, it's going to look different, dramatically different than the way we instruct our kids now, which includes all those developmentally appropriate for 5 and 6 year old, no 4-year-olds here, but 5 and 6 year old kids like we do now. We'll just have more opportunities to do it developmentally appropriate.
Well, I respectfully disagree with you.
With what part?
With what you're saying about an increased day, because I still focus on the emotional health of a child. And from my experience, an increased school day for kindergartners increases their ability to go through an entire day. And we could go back and forth with this, and we can have opposing points of view, but one of your remarks was the full-day kindergarten gives them a broader palette of experiences and opportunities. But that palette, if it is more than what a kindergarten child can handle emotionally, cognitively, academically, attention, focusing, listening, they're getting tired by the end of a day. And once again, I'm speaking from experience. I don't think that's an equitable balance. And I don't think that is the correct thing to do for kindergartners. Now, that is my personal and professional experience, and I would argue this with anyone. But argue it as we are now in a polite way.
Greg, I know we've mentioned this before, but do you happen to know how the percentages of our kids who go to daycare after their half day as opposed to going home? Do you have any idea?
I could probably get that. I think the majority of them go to some kind of aftercare, but I don't know the exact percentage.
I'm wondering if that percentage is increasing. My guess is it is, but I don't have that data.
Okay, so the next item is technology.
In fact, this is interject on the kindergarten thing. I think that there's no one formula with fit every family and every kids out there. And I can tell you that I used to go to school, not in this country. I go to school on Saturday morning too. And you know what? I can run around any kids here with facts about books. But guess what? The more millionaire, billionaire, more Nobel Prize winners, there are more talents created in this country than any other country. A recent international test 15 years old. United States was like 15, 16, 17, like down the list. It was beaten by Singapore, Hong Kong, and all those Asian like country. I was a product of those like system. And you know what? I will know more fact about those books than any of you will ever do. But guess what? They don't teach me how to think by myself. Okay? So you have to be really careful when you look at those so-called study. Depending on how you look at it. One study will say, hey, why don't we do it like Paris? All the kids go full day from preschool all the way up to when they are graduate. Okay, I mean, just be really careful. I would like the people look focus on what it is will be best for the kids in this community, rather than look at what happened over in different country, different state. Is that if the kids could benefit from a full day kindergarten, let them have it. Some kids will not do well. I can tell you that my kid, I'm so glad that she did not go to full day like kindergarten because she would have fallen apart the first day. But some kids will thrive in, hey, bring it on. So I think that we need to really be careful on not so passing judgment and say, well, what work for my kid doesn't mean that work for your kid or work for your kid. But the teachers and the school board need to look at what would be best for the kids in this like community, because there's different like makeup, and climate like mentioned may benefit certain segment of the population. Yes, may not be, but so I just said that I've been to different like education like system. They all have a good thing, and they have not so like the good thing. Back to your point, you know what? We were like 15 in the world competition in terms of kids in test score. Most Asian countries beat us on math and science.
Wait a second. How come I couldn't talk to somebody else directly in the thing?
No, I'm not.
He's not asking you a question, though.
No, I'm just talking.
Yeah, you just said.
Yeah, I'm just like pointing out
Okay.
that you did like mention that we are. No, but then again, here when I go
I
to,
don't mind. I don't mind.
I'm sorry.
I don't
Okay,
mind.
I'll face forward.
I'm just saying.
Okay, I mean when I go to
You
the
can face
department.
me. I'm just wondering why. That's fine.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no.
You can talk to me.
I mean, when
saying.
when I look at the Department of Educational website, and I think they post some of the other scores from some of the like ECAP or whatever tests earlier, a few months ago.
NAEP.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I looked at Charlotte Central Schools. Our kids here did much better than most other schools in this state.
But you know what? There's a lot of rich people in this town. And maybe it has to do with the fact that because they're smart, and so their kids are going to perform better, it's genetics. I'm just saying.
I mean,
Okay, so-
I can
Anyway.
So,
I know, I'm
anyway,
just
thank
saying.
you.
Thank you. So, go
Well,
ahead.
Well, just a personal point. I'm a father of 4. I've got a kindergartner now who's in a full-day program over at Williston. Just wanted to give that for context. So I go home every night and spend time with her after she's been through a full day of kindergarten. And I've had 3 older kids that have gone through full-day kindergarten. So just what you said about the percentage of folks who go to an aftercare situation, and a comment that Mr. Nola made earlier around, I think he used the word equity. It's another issue for the board to consider, because we are creating a 4-month period of time where parents are left to make a decision about how to spend that time, which is perfectly normal and natural. But it does create some built-in inequities around socioeconomics and the potential opportunities for some families is different than from others. And that when we look at all the time we're spending and focusing on closing the achievement gaps, especially in subgroups around socially economically disadvantaged kids and students in IEPs, and you think about the system that we have that doesn't necessarily create an equal playing field. I mean, I don't have hard and fast data that says that, but it doesn't necessarily create an equal playing field from 8 to 3 o'clock September through November. So just that comment make me think about that, please. The other thing is, if we do have full day kindergarten, kindergarten in Vermont is not compulsory. So any parent could decide that not that I would recommend this, but any parent could decide to do something different for their child in terms of alternative programs.
And I have, to your point, Joe, and my own daughter also would have been hard pressed to do full day kindergarten when that time came around. So we did something a little different with her too. And I've said in the past, I think that having a hybrid in the fall so that the afternoon programming is such that it's possible for families to choose to bring their kid home without disrupting the whole plan. I think that could be a good option. And I know, for instance, the Waldorf school arranges even their first grades such that certain afternoons of the week, families can take their kids home if they want and elect to do that without losing the flow of certain lessons that are in progress. They plan that way. And I do think that there are some kids, when kindergarten starts, for whom a full day is that's a tough transition. So I would recommend that.
As an aside, keep in mind, and this is an aside because it's not the primary point here, the taxes associated with such an increase are not elective. Participation in the class itself might be, but the taxes are not. But in general, when you look at educational philosophy, you got to take a close look and make a determination about when you're seeing some philosophical variant of No Child Left Behind oozing, sneaking, being squozen into, take your terminology, the education system. And that really is what all-day kindergarten is.
Okay. So I think just for purposes of going forward, we haven't decided whether or not to have full-day kindergarten as a part of the budget, but we'll have it continue in the information that we're getting for January. Moving on to technology, 18 additional laptop computers. And what Greg said earlier this evening was this flip-flopped from the last presentation where it was in the fourth item, and that was because the feeling that they needed additional laptops given the larger class size in 5th grade. Anyone's thoughts about keeping that, or adding that or not adding that?
I think that's needed. I think, personally, I'll speak to all these technology pieces. I think that they're all needed. I'm going to support all of them. Where we need to keep up with what's happening. More and more educational options are being presented electronically. Our kids need to be able to not only have those skills, but have that access to curriculum materials and differentiation options within the classroom. This is not a place we can skimp.
Does anyone else want to speak to the technology parts, either individually or as a whole?
Yeah, I would agree. As you get into the middle school grades, it becomes increasingly important. I mean, in high school, it's the predominant medium for delivering, your homework or a lot of the work outside the classroom is done electronically. So, it's just a question of numbers, I guess, right? If somebody's decided these are the numbers of machines that are necessary to give kids access, that's probably, I think it's a more pressing need in the older grades than 3rd and 4th, but I'd like to hear I know we went over it a little bit last meeting, but maybe 2 seconds on where they're going and what we have now.
Regarding just the third line, the
Maybe just-
14,400 piece?
Really all of it, in 2 seconds.
Sure. You want me to?
For the 5th grade piece, or?
Go ahead.
For the 5th grade piece, because we're gonna have more students in the 2 sections, we're recommending that we have laptops in addition to the carts, because they currently have 20 in the cart. So we're gonna recommend having 5 or 6 more per class, so that all students will have access at the same time to accommodate the 27 students per class versus just the 20 that they would
So
have.
the 14.4, that's the.
The
that
majority,
grade.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
The next piece, and the other piece to note on that one is that there are currently 4 desktop machines in each of those classrooms. Those are going to be redeployed around the building, and will lessen the number of desktop replacements that we're going to make, which is embedded in the technology budget that is on another slide. The second line is, as we discussed last meeting, we have a computer cart that was scheduled to be replaced next year. We're proposing that we replace it this year because of the condition it is in, which would mean that we would not have to replace a computer cart next year. The third line is a repeat of a proposal that was made last year to add a mobile computer lab to be shared among the 3rd and 4th grade teams. And that's 20 computers on a cart. Those computers, we're using an $800 number, which is around what we've been speccing those laptop computers out at.
Question, sorry, I have to go because I'm at the airport now. My name is Chris Morris, and I'm an IT professional, and I question your $800 number. What kind of laptops are you guys getting?
For $800.
That's
high.
That's a high price. That's what we do.
That's
We
a lot.
buy and sell laptops for a living, and that's a lot of money.
Can you get us a good deal?
That's what I said.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do, is we refurbish and sell laptops. But I mean, that's.
But actually, we don't want to,
No,
because we don't want to be any part of
involved with the
this.
school, but.
But we're just questioning how you got, where you came up with $800.
So we have, what's Mike Canfor's title?
Technology director.
The technology director for the SU, for the school, for the whole district, tends to put the quotes together. He puts together the specs that we need for the computers to run the OS that we're running, and to be able to handle the software that we use, and also have the durability that we want.
Sure.
And a warranty that we want. And he gets us the best deal that he can in terms of volume purchasing. And generally what we found is, for the last few years, we've bought Dell,
Yep.
with roughly about a 15-inch monitor, with a keypad. I can't give you any more specs than
That
that.
would be the Latitude E6510, which we sell. I sold one today for $450.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a year old. We buy them off lease, refurbish them, and sell them.
So we haven't been buying refurbished laptops. We do buy refurbished desktops.
I would
So
recommend you buy refurbished laptops. They're every bit as capable as a new one for half the cost.
It's something we can look into. I'll talk to Mr. Camphor about why we don't look in that direction, but generally, we haven't looked refurbished with laptops. We have with desktops. We've had success with the desktops. We get it
We sell
refurbished.
them for $450 at a profit, so we
Right.
pay about $300 a piece for them.
Right.
I make a motion, you talk to Chris.
No, we don't.
That's
I
something.
recommend you look into it, because you
we'll
can
look
save a
into
lot of money.
Yep.
And even if you have, you're not gonna get a warranty with it like you will with a new one, but the amount you can save, you can easily buy a few extras.
Okay. Well, hopefully that'll just work out perfectly. Anyone else have questions about any of the technology pieces or comments? Mr. Nola?
Thank you, Tom Nola. How long does a laptop usually last at the school? 4 years.
3 to 4 years.
Is there any possibility from what was just said that those laptops after 3 years can't be rebuilt?
We haven't found that to be cost effective. And then what happens is sometimes you're not able to run the OS, because to update it to the point where you can run your operating system and all the software, because as software companies come up with upgrades, if the computers you have don't have an operating system, or the amount of RAM, or the specs to run what your upgrades require.
Okay, I understand that.
But in some cases you can.
Are those computers then, after 3 years, can they be sold to a company to be rebuilt, or to earn some money back on the costs? Are they sold?
Have they been so?
Yeah, we can look at that. Yeah, I think we have actually done some of that in the past.
Some.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess we'll wait to see if Mike or somebody can give us some information about whether or not we can realize any cost savings, and then we still have to make a decision about whether or not we want to fund those.
The board should know that we're also exploring other technologies, platforms like Chromebooks, things like that, that are less expensive, provide less functionality, so you're making trade-offs with what you get. So, but we're doing some research in that area.
I make one more comment for you, and you probably already know this, but you might want to look into using a terminal server with a remote desktop connection so that you can run more modern software on an older computer, either Citrix or terminal services. Lets you get a lot more functionality out of older machines.
Yep. I believe that's actually been explored here, and maybe even piloted.
I have no idea what that means, but thank you. That's a good thing.
That's why it's good for the public to show.
I know. Anyone else on technology part? All right, so more to come next meeting. Increased nurse to 1.0 FTE. She is currently at 0.9. Anyone?
You have to have a full-time nurse.
I'm sorry?
I think you have to have a full-time nurse.
Okay.
I agree.
I agree. I think this is a, okay, so we'll keep that in for now. We're on the back page now of the decision packets. 0.6 FT reading language arts specialist. I know you kind of explained, can you explain again though?
Yeah,
'Cause,
I don't blame you.
like, if it could just be Medicaid, then could it not be in our budget at all, and then we could get that, but we
Okay,
wouldn't be
so-
paying for it.
So, actually, you could probably just pay you could pay for this through Medicaid and not even touch the phys ed position, just leave it where it is, and still have enough money to cover both next year. But that wouldn't be good bookkeeping, because really there's no good reason for that 40% phys ed teacher that's being paid for by Medicaid funds to continue to be paid for Medicaid funds. So we'd like to correct that. But
But Bob said it's already in the baseline, right?
All of these expenditures are in your, not.
So the
not this
PE
ad,
part.
But whether they have Medicaid revenue to support them or not, the expenditures are in your budget. So that phys ed position is already in the baseline budget. What Greg is proposing on the phys ed position is to no longer draw down Medicaid as an offset to support it.
Right. Oh, and I thought
Okay.
you said that was already a part of the baseline.
It is
was
part
that
of the
It wasn't
baseline.
in the that we wouldn't be getting Medicaid revenue for that. But that's not the case.
No, the Medicaid revenue, you correct me if
Oh,
I'm
that was the
wrong, but the
29.
$30,000 in Medicaid in the current year is targeted to support that position. It is there to support that position.
Gotcha.
So what we're doing with phys ed is we're no longer drawing down your Medicaid funds to negate the cost that you're recording on your budget.
So Bob, on this sheet he's passed out today, the 29,292
Yes,
in revenue is going to be attached to this position? Or-
is currently attached to the phys ed position.
But so I guess I misunderstood, but you said, I thought you just said it wasn't going to go towards the phys ed position.
What Greg has proposed is to no longer draw it down in support of the phys ed position, but to draw it down in support of this
So
position.
one way or another, we're spending the same amount and we're realizing the same amount of revenue from Medicaid. We're just sticking it in a different.
No, what he's saying is if we chose to hire someone and it was $51,000, we could draw down Medicaid, but PE is now an extra $30,000
26.
or $26,000.
So in other words-
So even though this doesn't come out of our general budget, we have an increase because PE is no longer.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at
submitted.
is that 29 would go to 0 if we didn't establish this position.
Correct. If you did what Greg said, to no longer use Medicaid funds to do the support of the phys ed position, and you did nothing else, then yes, it would go to zero. The money would stay in,
Yeah.
by and large.
And does the audit, was that in the auditor's recommendations? I didn't read the audit report that closely.
No, I
but
know of no reference to
Did it ever talk to
Medicaid funds
Medicaid?
and their use in the auditor's document that
Me neither.
three of us reviewed with you.
So it's not like the federal government's gonna come and say, stop spending that on.
No, there's no,
It's just you're not
there-
supposed
no
to.
one's sufficiently staffed to police
Yeah,
that
okay.
on you. So no, I think you can set your head on the pillow comfortably tonight, that won't happen. It just isn't, as we said earlier, it isn't good practice to take Medicaid funds and continue to use them for ongoing funding of the program you operate day in, day out. They really should be targeted as they're designed to be targeted, to do something of a different nature.
Am I correct in my understanding, Bob, that if we left the PE where it was, drawing down the Medicaid to the tune of 26,000 and change, and attempted to fund this position with the Medicaid, that wouldn't be sustainable for more than a year? Because,
Correct.
okay,
You run out of money quickly.
right.
That's good to know. So I support this use of Medicaid funds as well as the reaccounting of the physical education position to the general fund.
But for just looking at the budget, like this will show up, this would show up in the budget as an additional $51,000.
On the expenditure budget,
You'd have an
yes.
extra revenue of 50, right?
Correct. Yep, you're getting it.
Right.
So the budget as presented to the town would show nothing. I mean,
No,
it would, but
the
just the number
expenditure
would be
budget
zero.
as voted
Right.
by the town would show the $51,000 increase. When we moved forward to calculate tax rates, you'd show the benefit of the increased use of Medicaid funds. Okay.
It'd be easier if we could do it the other way.
That's
For
not,
us.
that's not generally
know.
accepted
That's
accounting
not the
practice
criterion
to,
for
to
making that
quote, do
decision.
it the other
I
way.
know.
Then you would have an auditor's problem.
All right, any other questions or opinions about this position?
Do we have data about the tier 2 need?
Yes, what kind of data would you like?
You tell me, you're the one who runs the place. What is it about that data that tells you this is gonna solve whatever problem you're looking at?
Well, we can look at the total number of students who we're identifying for as benefiting from Tier 2 services. And then you have the other piece, Clyde, are the way our current literacy specialist, Shannon Spellman, who's full-time, the way her time is currently utilized and what she can't do now because of the needs around the Tier 2 interventions with her other responsibilities. What we'd like Shannon to be able to do more of is be in classrooms more often, co-teaching, coaching, direct coaching with teachers. These are time-intensive activities that have research behind making real impact for kids. And because of her responsibilities and the STARS room staff that we have right now, she's not able to do those things that we want her to do more of. And this would enable that. This would provide some relief to that. So there's just the number in terms of there's this many kids who require Tier 2. I'm not sure we tell the whole story, but I could bring that number.
Well, my answer then is however you're funding this, whether it's with or without the approval of the auditors, I think it should be done.
Okay.
Wait, did we hear from Eric? Eric, you have a thought on this one?
Yeah, no, I think, I believe, Greg's made a case for it, and I would defer to his judgment.
All right, moving on, assistant cross-country coach. And I know we had a question from the audience raised about how we arrived at that number. I really have no idea what the, so if we could get some better information about what any of our coaches make, not enough. But I don't know if people want to weigh in. If no one wants to even explore this, then there's no need to dig into the numbers. My pitch before was that we have 4 coaches for soccer, 4 coaches for basketball. We have a co-ed team that had 38 last year, is expected to be higher next year. And it's real hard for the coach to manage the kid running 6.5-minute miles and the kid running 14-minute miles when you're running through trails. And so I just think for a lot of reasons, and for parity, and for a lot of those other, when we were talking, or when the board before I joined it was talking about cutting B-team sports, sort of all those arguments. It's a activity that a lot of kids can participate in. It's a sport that you can do here and do at the high school without fear of being cut. So I just think, I think it's a great program. And though I say I'm biased, both my boys ran cross country this year, so.
Well, none of my kids have done it, but I think it's a great program, and I think it's entirely valid to, we're talking about class size, it's sort of the same thing. I mean, there's a certain amount of coaching that you need, whether it's basketball, soccer, whatever the case may be, and I think it's probably worth at least being able to articulate and explain how we got to that number, if that is in fact the right number. But I think in principle, I would be in favor of another coach.
I feel the same way. Let's check the figure, but in general, I'm supportive of that.
Anyone else?
What does a cross-country coach do these days?
We have the cross-country coach devotes his entire fall to that cross-country team. I think Charlotte ran 3 or 4 home meets where he laid out the trails, did all the, figured out parent volunteers to do the scoring and monitoring the trails, entered the data, and leads the kids on their runs. He could do more individual coaching to help kids improve their running, the people who are, the faster runners. He could give them some guidance, and it's hard to do that, as I said, when you have kids running 6-minute miles and kids running 15-minute miles. So he could do some actual running coaching, or do more running coaching if he wasn't dealing with 40 kids on his own.
And I'm sorry, how many participants did you say there are these days?
This year there were 38 runners, based on information he's getting from incoming 5th grade parents. He's anticipating more than the 38 he had this year.
And the coach is currently utilizing volunteers for some of these tasks?
Oh, the parents do a ton at the home meets, yeah. And do, yeah, the parents do a lot, but the parents aren't at the trainings.
How come you have to pay $4,000 for a cross-country coach?
Well, no, that's what we said we just want information about the numbers. We're not sure about
So
the
that's
numbers.
$100 per student. If you have 40 kids next year, there's $100 per participant as an assistant coach. So I just want to let you know that CVU, I am totally for cross country. I think it's awesome because, like Kristen said, you get to CVU and any kid, they don't cut anybody. I think it's awesome. But also, as in football, we have 6 coaches for 121 kids, 6 days a week, 2.5 hours a day, equipment, getting them to games with the equipment, food, and they get paid about $1,200 for the season. So, and that's that's just another coach. And I run a whole youth program for the Buccaneers. We had signed up 142 kids this year. We didn't pay one coach. It's all on parent volunteers, and I know parents get strapped, but when you start spending, $100 per kid for assistant coach, I would rather see the bottom line of adding two of the athletic equipment and buying all those kids new uniforms and making feel like a whole team and getting more parents to volunteer.
Okay. Anyone else on? All right. I guess we'll just continue right down the line. Increase early level reading titles, $3,000, just as people may recall, was requested last year. We did not fund this last year, right?
Correct.
No. Anyone on the early level reading titles?
My feeling about these last ones, again, we got to this point last year where we were looking at some of the items that weren't the top priorities, nor were they the biggest ticket items, and starting to wonder, are these things that we could appeal to the PTO for, or, other potential donors? That's one question about the athletic uniforms, the books, and the science supplies. The substitutes, I don't really know, and I think that question came up last year too. I don't know why it's a decision packet. To me, that's a given that it's needed, and it should just be built into the budget. We have a sub-budget for regular illness and et cetera for the staff. And I just think we need to build this into our plan.
Actually, that decision packet was one of the few that kind of made it through last year, because
Right.
the board's rationale, if I remember correctly, was, well, you're going to spend it anyway, right?
Right.
So,
And and that is, I'm sorry to say, that is a line that we overrun every year. So this is a step in the right direction in terms of correcting that. Well, yeah. So.
But so the fact that we passed it last year doesn't mean it then exists in the baseline, or is this an additional
This is
increase beyond
additional-
that?
This is an additional increase.
Okay.
The problem continues.
I see. Okay.
Basically, what the $4,000 last year did was just allow us to keep up with the addition of the studio work, knowing we're gonna have that many more subs
Yep.
this year. This is more of a move to try to close the gap a little bit in what we're overrunning every year.
I understand.
And when is best practice? How much more time do we have on that?
And we have,
2 cohorts are going to continue for 1 more year next year, and the following year, the 3 to 5 cohort will continue for an additional year beyond that.
So we have 14, 15, and 15, 16, or?
Yes,
16,
that's
17,
correct.
So 15, 16.
But it'll
Yes.
be
in 15,
winnowing.
16, it drops off.
It will
Yeah.
drop off in 2 years.
Okay.
I'm with Adora on that one. I don't really see it as a decision packet. It's just going to be what it's going to be, and this is an initiative that we have that is just going to, it just is. So I wouldn't call that a decision packet. The thing about the early level titles, my only question on the subject of it, if the thing has utility, I mean, if they're going to be in use, then yes, I'm in favor of it, but is there some reason? I'm spinning my wheels here because I don't understand the confusion about how it would not be in use, or why we would not fund it. I mean, are there so few of these things that we don't have enough for the kids that we have that want to use them? Or, I mean, what's the backstory here?
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. The backstory is we've been trying to beef up our library in terms of multiple copy early readers. So that those are level, so the texts are leveled A through Z. So, the middle school kids are reading QR levels, and as kindergartners come out reading levels B, C, D, E, there's a lot of guided reading instruction that happens where you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 children at a time at a horseshoe-shaped table with a teacher here teaching a guided reading lesson. All those students have the same text. That's, research-based level text, and they're doing what's called guided reading.
We called those reading groups when I was in elementary school.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
We just put the word guided in front of it. So we don't have enough of those multiple copied leveled texts. And we've been trying to buy as many as we can every year. So we're better than we were. And we don't have enough in our regular supply line to close the gap. This is a measure that we feel like we'd get these multiple copies and we'd be set for a while. They do get destroyed. I mean, they're paperback, they're little books about this big. We take good care of them, but they are consumable. But you're not replacing them every year. They have a little bit of a life.
There's also a change in content, correct? There's more
Yes, good
informational
point.
text.
Yes, correct.
And what about the book fair in the fall? That was always our PTO mission. Is it was once called the Ruth Orr Book Fair, and we used to take all that money and give it to the Stars Reading Room for many years when I worked there. Or we raised the money. So are they not doing that anymore?
That money still comes into the Stars Room and the library, and that money is spent every year.
So you're asking on top of that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And this is the kind of thing where if the board approved $3,000, we'd spend $3,000. If the board approves $2,000, we'll go out and get $2,000 worth of books. I mean, it's not that the books cost $3,000. We'll buy as much as we can for $3,000. So.
Right.
Anyone else have these items? Questions or ideas if we want to keep these in, or?
Well, as a mom of an early reader, I'm all for it.
Clyde or Eric?
Yeah.
I thought I said yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If there's
And
not
that's
been
to
a
all of
problem.
this? How about the athletic equipment and science supplies?
I'm not gonna spend any time talking about $1,000. I'm
Okay.
sorry, that's getting too far down the line. And the science supplies, we've got paragraphs of description for other things, and for this we have support science instruction K-8. Well, I hope so. I mean, $2,000 for science supplies, I am making an assumption that it'll be well spent, but I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on a debate about $2,000 for science supplies, unless somebody thinks it's a debatable subject or a debatable amount of money. We're going to trust you not to waste that particular $2,000.
It will be well spent.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so.
Before you go on,
Yeah.
a general comment, I think it was Jill who brought it up. I really haven't heard any or much mention of the PTO in any of these conversations, and I really have lost track of what they funded and what they haven't funded over the years. So to me, that's kind of an administrative subcategory, interacting with the PTO and getting as much mileage out of their activities as you can.
PTO's been very supportive. They funded 4 wins again this year.
They supported the science supplies that were not approved last year for that.
A number of mini grants proposed by teachers. So they've been very supportive. They do, it is a finite amount of money that they can raise in a given year. So it's not, once you put a couple of these things together, you get.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I have a couple things. One is I'm wondering if we can review, and I'm assuming that all the decisions that we came to were preliminary based on the whole, right? So can we just review what happened? And then one other thing is that along the way, I realized, I don't know if it's too late to ask for this, but I realized I would love to have a brief executive session on personal issues related to the budget. Can I still ask for that?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No?
Technically, it's against the law unless you advertise it, and unless it's an emergency item, which I don't know if the thing you have is, but it's got to be on the agenda, actually first as a discussion item and then advertised as an executive session. For
So is
those
that the case all the
for
time
those
when-
aspects of it that turns out you can't discuss under open meeting? Was that the case under what?
Well, I feel like sometimes in adjustments to agenda, we add executive session
If you
for
recall
personnel and
that
for negotiations.
incredibly exhaustive set of notes that I gave you last year about the VSBA conference, that was one of the things.
They said not
And
to
we,
do.
I pointed out at the time, routinely violate that law.
Okay.
So if there's some emergency aspect to this and you have to have an answer or input, like right now, that's one thing. If it isn't, it's another.
I wouldn't call it an emergency.
Okay, so let's figure out how to get it onto our next agenda. Okay.
Clyde's correct, the acceptable technique would be added to the agenda if there's likelihood you're gonna need it, and then not take advantage of it at the meeting if you don't need it.
Right.
But it's better to have it on than add it at the front end.
Yeah, so if you can add that to our next agenda.
Okay. So does it make sense then just to always have one on as a
Some
placesetter?
boards move that
Seems
direction.
disingenuous,
No,
but
they also frown on that.
okay.
And some boards do it, but as I said, if you're anticipating it, you add it as a discussion item, and then at whatever point, you also add it as executive session. But in the discussion part, you discuss what you're going to discuss in executive session so that these people know it, and then whatever it turns out you cannot actually discuss in open meeting, you take into executive session afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Did you have other questions that were unrelated to that?
No, just this process now.
Okay. All right, so, and Bob, next time we'll get a rundown, at least by next meeting, if not before, right, of what these changes look like to the bottom number and.
We'll
like a
do
rough-
something very similar to what you have here. It'll be very clear at the end that if you do all of these, what impact it's gonna have on the budget,
Okay.
if that's what you're asking for.
And a rough, and can we get at that time too, a rough, impact to taxpayers
Yes, I could
as well?
redo the tax sheet based on you accepting what has been proposed in total.
Meaning, like, I feel like sometimes later in the process we hear, if you have a $300,000 house, this is just a rough idea of what the impact is gonna
I
be.
could also do that
That
if
would
you'd
be
like to. Yep.
All right, so to Dora's
do.
point,
That's just a quick question.
yes.
Bob, is it correct math to be thinking if baseline is $7.3 million, that about every 73,000 is a percent?
If you've just done that math, oh, but you're a musician, right? You're not. If you,
Is that how you move the
Math
decimal places
improves.
over?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
so roughly every $70,000, we're talking about a percent.
yes,
Okay. Thank you.
I see how you got there,
Okay,
wizard.
thank you.
Sorry.
Okay,
Go home and get that kind of abuse.
so for
Sorry.
next time,
Let the record show.
I believe we have agreed in theory, though not by vote, to reduce the one FT primary classroom teacher. We have as a question mark the next corresponding reduction in EA staff, pending some clarification about that number, or I guess also in keeping with what this reduction looks like further down to EA and more language staff. we have agreed in theory to the reduction of 2.0 FTE middle level teacher. Greg said we don't have to worry about the O&M savings, that just is. Yes.
The point about the 0.1 reduction in R. Since the board has decided, at least at this point,
To do
with the
this.
reduction in the 2.0, now that 0.1 rolls into the math that we're gonna do on the
Okay.
resulting. So it's
Right.
not necessarily a this plus this.
Right, okay.
It'll roll in together.
And Adora, that's what kind of you were asking about.
Yeah,
Once we do
that's-
that analysis,
I'm curious to
how
see
does
what
that
happens
impact
there.
this?
Okay,
Yep.
so we'll have better numbers about what that reduction will look like. Moving over to decision packets, we're hoping to get some alternative numbers for the 2.0 non-intensive classroom paras from Cindy.
Or more detail.
Or
on-
more detail,
Mhm.
and also with the understanding that, it's possible for us to allocate any amount towards that line item if we choose to go forward with that line item. We're leaving in full-day kindergarten for now. We are looking for some additional detail on the 3 next items, which are all the technology pieces, both about our options for a less expensive laptop or any other sort of cost savings. Is that correct?
Mhm.
We've agreed in theory to the increase of from the nurse from 0.9 to 1.0. We agreed in theory to the somewhat neutral 0.6 FTE reading language arts specialist. We are looking for additional information about the cost of an assistant cross-country coach. And I think that's about it. I don't know if we want to explore having the, how the PTO may be able to fund some of those lesser items.
I think that's at least a question we should ask them.
Okay.
Not the substitutes, but the other pieces.
So these 3 parts. And is that something we want the board to do or the administration to do?
What do you recommend, Greg and Audrey? Is that question better coming from the board or from you?
I think we're fine.
We're fine.
Asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I believe the consensus is that the substitute cost for best practices is a part of that
We'll just do
professional
it.
development. Okay, maybe some amazing things for the good will happen between now and next time. All right. Consent agenda 5.0. Is there any reason to pull anything out of the consent agenda? All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Sorry.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any director's comments?
I would like to thank the 2 of you for stepping up
Oh.
and being our budget buddies. It's really great to have you here and just have more people on this side of the table. It's really great.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all the members of the public who came and spoke, and it takes some courage to do that, so that's great too.
Yes, thank you for coming, and hopefully as kindergarten parents will just keep coming
It
and
was
one
very
day just be up
informative.
here instead of
Definitely.
us. And yeah, thank you to the audience. I know budget stuff is very hard, and it's very hard for us. It's very hard for everybody. And one more thing, I just wanted to point out what an awesome 7th and 8th grade concert it was last night. And, I just think about how it's really hard, change is so hard, the change in staffing, the change in, and we had a new thing this year, this guitar group played, they're the general music students, and it was a new thing, it was really great, and I just think Jenny and Andy are doing a great job. All right, so 7.0, confirm next meeting dates. and this is not on here, but the CSSU budget meeting is tomorrow at 5:30? Is that right?
Yes, 5:30.
5:30, and that's at central office if anyone would like to go. Central office is in Shelburne Town Hall on the
Top floor of the
top
building.
floor. They just keep going up. Our next budget meeting is here at the CCS Library at 6:30 on January 7th. At that meeting, we really should be coming up with some pretty good numbers because the following week on the 14th, it's 6 p.m. instead of 6:30. And I think that's because it's traditionally been at 6. Will be the budget hearing and approval. And at that time, we have the number that then is what is voted on town meeting day. And I think that's all.
Just a quick announcement, there was no principal's report tonight, and we wanted to get this information out to you because you might see it in the newspaper. We were awarded a farm to school grant.
Yes. Oh, great.
So
Excellent.
the volunteers of the Food Squad and 4Rs committee hustled to put the grant proposal together, which they have done in the past, and we haven't won the grant. This year we did win the grant. We just found out a few days ago, and it's going to go mostly to funding a farm to school coordinator. So a person who's going to kind of coordinate the efforts and move
That's
things along.
awesome.
So really exciting.
How much?
Is it like $14,000?
No, it got reduced. They made some changes, and it's about $10,000 now.
Awesome.
Awesome. That's great.
great.
Well, thank you to the Food Squad and everyone who applied for that.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, 8.0, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.